and I've only used it a couple of times myself. So I can see that there actually are quite a few more participants than might appear on your screen that are kind of all lined up on the bottom there in little circles.
We have to remember the initials or we're stuck.
Yeah, initials are going to be a little bit tricky here. Some people I see, like Denise and David, have created actual names for themselves. So there might be some way of doing that on your screen. I know if you want to see more people than when I opened, by default, it only showed like 4 screens. You can hit those 3 dots and choose large gallery, but that still doesn't seem to get you everybody.
Tammy's name is there. Tammy has her name.
Yeah, Tammy has her. I don't know how.
That. She's muted. She's muted.
But anyway, we will start our meeting. I want to call this Fairfax County History Commission meeting of Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021 to order. And we are going to start with an audibility of members' voices to conduct this meeting wholly electronically. The History Commission needs to make certain findings for the record to evidence our compliance with all applicable laws. These motions address this compliance. First, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each board member participating in this meeting to state your name and your location. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. And so I'm going to begin with Mary Lipsey. Is Mary on yet? Okay, Mary, I see your initials.
I know.
I don't see her. If you open up the participant at the top, there's 2 little people, an icon with 2 little people, and you click on that, you'll get a menu bar on the right that shows all the participants. So you get a full list, and I don't see Mary's name.
Okay, I just saw an ML, so I thought that might be her. I see there's the little people. Thank you.
I don't see the people.
So yeah, it's they look they kind of look like people. Think of babies wearing bibs.
Right here, show participants.
Yeah, there you go.
This is all new adventure for us.
All that did was shrink you. Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So Gretchen Bulova. Oh, actually, I should just go through this list. Barbara
Do you want
Peters.
me to go, Cheryl?
Sorry, Gretchen, are you there? Go ahead.
Hi, Gretchen Bulova, calling in from Braddock, Fairfax, part of Fairfax County.
Awesome, thank you, Gretchen. Carol Herrick. Carol, I actually see you on our list. Can you you have to unmute yourself, hon? Carol, can you unmute yourself?
Carol may need to call in. I think she has mic issues with her computer, and I see it's 1 caller on the line, but I don't recognize that. Carol, is that you that just joined? No, I'm
we'll
sorry.
come back to her.
That's me. I called in Steve Sherman.
All right, Steve, let's call you then. Steve, where are you calling from?
Steve Sherman from Franconia.
Okay, great. Thank you. Subi Mehdi.
Subi Mehdi, Drainsville District, McLean, Virginia.
Okay. Elise Murray.
Elise Murray, Vienna.
Thank you. Barbara Naif.
Barbara Naif, Reston, Hunter Mill.
Ann Stuntz.
Ann Stuntz, Hunter Mill District.
Phyllis, I believe, cannot make it tonight. Phyllis is not. Anybody see Phyllis listed?
No.
Yeah, she emailed me late this afternoon and indicated she has a project due.
I'm here.
Hello.
Oops, who's I'm?
Lynn.
Oh, okay.
Lynn
Thanks, Lynn.
Springfield. The second agenda, this link did not work. The first agenda did. So just FYI.
Okay. Lynn is here. Barbara Peters.
Barbara Peters, Annandale, Mason District.
Okay. Ann Barnes.
Ann Barnes is here. Hello, Ann Barnes is here.
Okay, yes, Ann, where are you calling from?
703-541.
Oh, no, I just meant like what location.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm in Gunston, Virginia, representing the Mount Vernon district.
All right, thank you. Sally Lyons.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, because my picture isn't up. I'm in Colchester.
All right, great. Thank you. Tammy Manarino.
Tammy Manarino, representing Mount Vernon District.
Sukovac Schumann.
Sukovac Schumann Mantua for Providence District.
All right, thank you. Jordan Tannenbaum.
Jordan Tannenbaum at Fairfax County, representing the Springfield District.
Okay, Esther McCullough, are you there? Okay. Robert Beach. Robert, have you called in? Okay. David Meyer. I thought we did see David earlier.
Yeah, we did. He's on there. He's just muted.
David, can you unmute yourself?
That's not. Maybe he stepped away for a second.
I don't know. I saw a change in his status there.
His circle jumped.
Oh, and then he's back to being muted. David, you might have to, is he calling in, Denise?
Not that I can tell.
So we just show you. Oh,
yeah,
I see. It just disappears when I move my cursor over it, regardless. When I move my cursor over anybody, their mute symbol disappears. So
Got
you
it.
didn't necessarily react to that.
There are 3 callers on the line. One is 302-994. I think that's Steve Sherman. 541-0719. I think that is Ann Barnes. But there is a 356-822-8223. And could you state your name, please?
Same number I've used for 2 years. Carol Harris, Drainesville, Virginia.
I'm sorry, I have not memorized your telephone number, Carol. So Carol is on the line, Drainesville, Virginia.
Okay.
And Mary just joined us as well.
Yes. Hi, Mary. Do you want to please confirm that we can hear you as well as see you?
Yes, Mary Lipsey at Braddock District.
Okay. And Carol here. We had skipped Carol earlier. All right. Hopefully we'll get David. If you can hear us, hopefully you can reconnect, and we can, so that we can get your input as well. I also want to do a voice check with Connor. Connor Williams is our guest this evening.
Yeah, hi, Connor Williams, Naming Commission historian. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, thank you. All right. All right. So second, I'm going to pass the gavel on to Lynn Garvey Hodge so that I may be heard to make the following motions. And I'm going to try these by unanimous consent. So I move that the History Commission certify that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this commission and the public to physically attend this meeting in person, and the usual procedures cannot be implemented safely or practically. As a result, I further move that the Fairfax County History Commission conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by calling 157-429-5982, conference ID 627-687-315 £. All the here is, if there's no objection, we will accept that motion. Or are there any objections? Hearing none, motion passes. Also, by unanimous consent, I finally move that the History Commission certify that matters on its agenda today relate to the COVID-19 emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government and or statutorily required or necessary to continue operations in the discharge of the History Commission's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. You can hand back my gavel. As I noted earlier, Commissioner Phyllis Ford is excused. And we can proceed. I want to proceed with we have a presentation to begin our meeting this evening by Connor Williams, who is the historian for the Commission on the Naming of Items of the Department of Defense that commemorate the Confederate States of America or any person who served voluntarily with the Confederate States of America, also more easily known as the Naming Commission. So welcome, Connor. Appreciate you coming out tonight. And Connor has a presentation to make on the research that he's been doing, correct?
Yes, hi, and thank you for welcoming. It's one more sound check. You can hear me all right?
Yeah.
I should also admit that I'm also home during the pandemic due to safety concerns, so it's bath time next door with my kids. I think they're probably not going to barge in, but apologies to any noises that come across the internet there. I'm going to share my screen for a few minutes. My hope is that this presentation will take about 10 minutes, and then I'm happy to hear questions. But as Cheryl said, the Naming Commission has been charged by Congress to identify Department of Defense assets that commemorate the Confederate States of America or anyone who voluntarily served in the Confederate States of America. And our remit has a number of steps, but the most relevant ones there is, for this purpose, I should say, are identifying assets that commemorate the Confederate States, and then recommending new names to Secretary of Defense for those assets that do in fact commemorate the Confederate States of America. We have some other tasks as well. I say we, it's a shorthand. I'm not a commissioner. I should make that very clear. I'm the historian who works for the commission. I am not an appointed commissioner. I do not have a vote in this matter. I work for them. To that extent, there are some Department of Defense assets like Fort Lee that are pretty obvious that Robert E. Lee is a name that needs to change. Fort Belvoir, when the commission reached out to the military Department of Defense for assets that might need investigation, they brought up Fort Belvoir as being in the no pun intended gray area, that it commemorates a plantation on which enslaved people worked. It is one of the very few forts stateside to be named after a place instead of a person. And uniquely, it was named after a Civil War general, Andrew Jackson Humphreys as Fort Humphreys, and then renamed Fort Belvoir in 1935. So the commission is trying to figure out whether this needs to be renamed, what the recommendation should be, and they've asked me to do research for them into the name of it. I do want to, at the outset, thank both Cheryl and Tammy Manarino for all the assistance they've offered. They've been incredible in sending many articles and looking at archives there. And so this is it's a group effort of historians. I really appreciate all your assistance. Just briefly, myself, as I said, I'm a historian. I specialize in 19th century and 20th century United States history, especially the history of memory, especially the history of the memory of the Civil War. I'm a historian full-time, so that's my career. This is my current client, is the Naming Commission. And I really have very little connection to Fort Belvoir. I should say my father grew up in Annandale, Virginia, went to high school there. My grandfather worked in the military in the Pentagon. But I'm approaching this really as a scholar and as a relative neutral outsider who knew Fort Belvoir was a place, but really only learned about it until a few days ago. General Ty Sedgley is one of the commissioners, and he's one of the people I report to. He wrote a book on this subject, and he wrote some things about Fort Belvoir. I'm not General Sedgley, so he wrote those things before I met him. I do talk with him and work with him, but I just want to point that out that I can't really speak to anything he wrote besides as another reader of his writing. I'm going to share my screen, I think, or I know I'm going to try to share my screen. Can you see my screen on your screens?
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. And you can still hear me also. Wonderful.
Yes, correct.
So at the outset, I just want to mention an important clarification. I try to make it in italicism to make it easy on the eyes, but because they're being recorded, I work for the Naming Commission. I've done this research largely at the request of the Naming Commission, but I'm speaking today strictly in my own personal capacity as a United States historian and interested American citizen. I'm not speaking in any official capacity as a Naming Commission's historian, and I'm certainly not here to speak for the commissioners themselves, and none of my comments should be construed as representing the thoughts of the Naming Commission or any individual commissioner. My purpose is to employ the tools of historiography to discuss the possible explanations for the 1935 name change to Fort Belvoir, what that commemorates. I just want to be very clear that these are my thoughts as a historian, but this is not an official presentation of the Naming Commission, nor is it anything of the naming commissioners themselves. So with that being said, the question that's called us here today, or my presentation, is about Fort Belvoir, and there are actually very few facts about the renaming. Really, the only fact that we have about it is that Army General Orders Number 1, the orders issued by the Army on February 14, 1935, state one sentence that Fort Humphreys will now be known as Fort Belvoir. And essentially what that means is that in 1935, the Army, Secretary of the Army, Secretary Dern, established that a fort formerly named after the gentleman on the left, Andrew Atkinson Humphreys, who was a leading general in the Union Civil War. He's not Grant, Sherman, Sheridan level, but pretty high up there. In this famous picture of Lincoln at Antietam, he is second from right here. That's Humphreys himself, so a important general. That his name was taken off the fort, and it was named after what at that point were excavated ruins of the Belvoir Manor plantation. And one thing I think that's kind of interesting here that we see more and more is that how the manor is always grander in people's minds than it is in the ruins. So here's a recreation of a gentleman standing by the door. You can see that now that man's gotten much smaller in its recreation. The manor's gotten bigger. There's a third floor that may or may not have existed. But there is this fascination with Belvoir, with this manor that really takes over the mindset. And so that's what we know. We also know that it was a surprise to the commandant of Fort Humphreys. He was actually writing a song about Fort Humphreys, and he said, "Wait, it's the name's being changed." That's news to me. He welcomed it. It also is known that most engineers opposed the move. Most of the Army engineers at Fort Belvoir wanted to stay as Fort Humphreys. For other reasons, he was the chief of the Corps of Engineers for many, many years. So my guiding principles in this work, these are historiographical principles that most historians agree on and write long books on, as many of you know. But I try to go with two rather pithy quotes. First is the opening to L.P. Hartley's 1953 novel, The Go-Between. Just that the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there, is how he writes it. And it's really important to remember that as much as we want to interject our values into the past, our beliefs, our history, people in 1935 were operating with a very different set of assumptions about this nation's history, about its origins, about what mattered as historical, what did not. And we have to always try to think about the past in terms of their own understanding. So that's what I mean by the past as a foreign country, do things differently there. Another point I want to make here is from Robert Penn Warren, a son of the South, and his famous 1961 essay on the legacy of the Civil War. And in that essay, Robert Penn Warren wrote, "We may say that only when Lee handed Grant his sword was the Confederacy born. Or to state matters another way, in the moment of defeat, Confederacy entered upon its immortality." So this is the idea that the Confederacy is something that had a long history in American life, and American culture, and that really became greater in the years after the Civil War than it ever was during the Civil War itself. And that's going to be very important because the questions were ultimately asking of this is, what does the name Fort Belvoir commemorate? Does it commemorate the Confederacy? Those are the questions that we need to figure out as naming commission. Refining that is the following question, I think. Why did President Roosevelt rename this from Fort Humphreys to Fort Belvoir in 1935? And in that sense, the local history really matters as to how it was understood in 1935. What history were they working with in 1935 when they made this name change? One more idea just for how I got this. This is something that many of you are familiar with called the lost cause. But it's this idea that you have the Civil War that happened. You have our present here. In the middle came this period of Confederate glory, of Confederate tribute that Fort Belvoir happened right in the middle of. And all the memorials, all the museums, all the popular culture, all the textbooks of the lost cause continue to kind of press down on our present. It's when our grandparents tell us stories about how enslavement wasn't that bad. It's when, we have this desire to somehow be a rebel soldier. It's when we want to keep finding ways to make Robert Lee's treason not as bad as it was. The lost cause still kind of is in our present, still pushing down on us through all these things. And Belvoir is named right in the middle of it. I mean, a few things that happened in 1935. Douglas Southall Freeman's biography of Robert E. Lee is published, wins the Pulitzer Prize. This is a glorification of Robert E. Lee as the greatest American ever, the greatest Virginian ever. Gone with the Wind is being drafted. The book, the movie comes 4 years later. Lincoln's birthday is not celebrated in the South. Instead, they celebrate Robert E. Lee's birthday. United Autos Confederacy meetings are front page news in many local papers. There's a massive revival in Civil War history, and all this leads to a fascination with plantation beauty, with old Virginia life, with the founding fathers and the Confederates being one and the same, with the Confederates being defenders of American liberty. And we're trying to get around this and kind of think about what was Belvoir really. I don't have it on this slide, but you can imagine kind of trying to fly an airplane over the lost cause and land somewhere in the past without any of this this history that we have. That's our goal. Now, within that, there are kind of two big narratives we're encountering, and they both have a lot of merit. So that I am, as a historian, am presenting both of them. The one that many of you are probably most familiar with has to do with George Washington. It's that Fort Belvoir was a neighboring plantation to Mount Vernon, that it was a formative place in George Washington's life, that the Fairfaxes were good friends, neighbors, that Washington's first love may have been Sally Fairfax, unrequited love. It's where he learned how to survey. It's where he learned how to be a Virginia gentleman. And that in the 1930s, there was a massive interest in the history of Virginia. There was a massive interest in George Washington because it was his bicentennial of his birthday. And that people like Lewis Hurdle, who owned Gunston Hall, appealed to FDR to change the name of Humphreys to Belvoir, to remember this old Virginia history. And that had happened. We know that Hurdle invited Roosevelt to lunch at Gunston Hall, that Roosevelt and Hurdle discussed this, and Hurdle writes in his diary that the president's parting words, that he would restore the rightful name of Belvoir to the area. And Cheryl's research has showed how many newspaper articles there were calling this region Belvoir, how long the tradition of calling it Belvoir went back. So this is definitely a real narrative. I will say that this illustration, which is on the Belvoir ruins at Fort Belvoir on the interpretive plaques, if Washington's learning how to survey, he's really learning more how to stand while other people do the work for him, including one probably enslaved person. I don't mean to be too glib with that because he was a surveyor by trade, but this shows kind of some of the issues with this lost cause history that we're focusing a lot on this man and not the two gentlemen assisting him. But so that's a narrative that makes a lot of sense. It's a narrative that certainly some of the facts bear out. there are a few questions that I still have about this. And the biggest one is that Washington and Hurdle's lunch happens 300 days about before the name is changed. So there's 300 days between this promise to change the name and the name actually being changed. When Harold Ickes, the Secretary of the Interior, comes, it's 60 days from Ickes' visit to Gunson Hall until the name changed. For 15 years, Lewis Hurdle had been petitioning people to change the name of Belvoir. And so all this time elapses, and we know from the facts that all Roosevelt had to do is say, I'm Commander-in-Chief, I want this changed, and they changed the name. So why did all this time pass? And that's where the second narrative comes in. And this narrative has everything to do with politics, has everything to do with the sons of Confederate veterans, in some cases, gentlemen who lived through the Confederacy themselves. And that's the idea that Roosevelt changed the name largely as a political favor to Carter Glass, to Harry Byrd, to Howard Smith, who are these gentlemen here, Byrd, Glass and Byrd. There's Carter Glass over Roosevelt's shoulder as he signs the Glass-Steagall Banking Act. There's Howard Smith, who were all Southern Democrats, all Virginian Democrats, who led a much larger coalition. There's tons of news coverage from this that Byrd especially, but Glass also a symbolic leader, were men who were leading a Southern opposition to the New Deal for the first time in history at that point. They had gone along with the first New Deal, but now at the Works Progress Administration, $5 billion, at the Social Security Act, they were balking, and they were balking along racial terms largely. And that this was Belvoir was kind of a kitchen sink effort to appeal to these Southern Democrats for support. You can kind of see the way the Civil War played in these men's minds. This is Harry F. Byrd. He's giving a speech a week after or 2 weeks after Belvoir is renamed. And he's talking about the Works Progress Administration, things that built the Hoover Dam and buildings throughout the nation. He said, at the conclusion of the war, when Virginia was devastated like France and Belgium in the late war, and West Virginia was taken from us by the force of arms, we found ourselves saddled with a huge bonded indebtedness for public works, which had even then become nearly valueless. So you see Harry Byrd is thinking about the Works Progress Administration in terms of the Civil War and in terms of a very biased interpretation of the Civil War, where West Virginia was taken from Virginia by the force of arms, that Virginia was devastated. Well, it was devastated, but Virginia seceded from the Union. So it's the idea that Fort Belvoir is really to appeal to men like this. Now, even there, is that the Confederacy? I'm not sure. There are political deals all the time that don't involve the Confederacy. But this does seem to have, the timing is so clear that it's difficult for me to believe that Roosevelt just forgot about his promise for 300 days and then decided to do it right when these Virginia Democrats were rebelling against him. So I went to the local paper and I tried to feel, what are people reading at this time? What are they thinking about? Not in the grand halls of Washington, but in the days, the daily lives. There are 3 op-eds, and these are excerpted from larger points, but January 25th, right before the name is changed, you have this idea that the people of Fairfax County, and this is from the Fairfax Herald, I should say, in general, and of Mount Vernon District in particular, are very properly resisting the latest attempt of outsiders to take jurisdiction over land in the county, exemplified by the attempt of the arbitrary authorities at Fort Humphrey to make a target range at Anketink Bay. Now, I don't think that today Fairfax County views DC and the government as outsiders, but they sure did back then. And there's this idea of arbitrary jurisdiction. If this is Virginian soil, it's Virginia. And I said it should be February 15th. I apologize for that error. When the Belvoir name is changed, they write, "It is certainly fitting that the name of this ancient estate, which are so intimately connected with the life of Fairfax County's greatest citizen, be preserved, rather than that of some more or less obscure Northern Army officer who was in no way connected with Virginia or Fairfax County." And that sentiment, again, that the Union general has no place on this fort. He doesn't deserve a place on the fort. He's an obscure Northern Army officer. Not obscure. I showed you the picture of him in Lincoln. He was a key general who saved the day at Gettysburg, one of many. He helped win the Battle of Five Forks. And this idea, this is what we've heard before, but this is from the local paper. Then came the war, the Civil War. Virginia was devastated by the Northern hordes, and the hordes, and a large part of her territory seized by brute force and erected into the state of West Virginia. I think we know today that West Virginia was an emancipationist state that didn't care for enslavement and voted to join the Union. At the end of the struggle, the public works were supposed to be liquidating, had been almost totally destroyed, and the state saddled with a huge debt. So you have, again, they're blaming the Civil War for the failure of government works initiatives like the ones Roosevelt's proposing. So it's pretty clear to me that this is a place that's awash not only in Revolutionary War memory, but in Civil War memory. And that there are people saying George Washington was a Confederate. There are lots of kind of broader books about this. There's a great book called This War Ain't Over, all about how the Civil War was on everybody's mind in the 1930s. You know, there's a kind of coda to this all, and that's that on June 1, 1935, right after Fort Belvoir is renamed, the United Artists of the Confederacy donate a portrait of Robert E. Lee in Confederate gray to Fort Belvoir. And this is a major event. They wait till all the roads are good because you don't want muddy roads in the spring. And the presidents of several state chapters of the UDC show up. All the UDC leadership, by UDC I'm using shorthand for United Daughters of the Confederacy, which were a big, prominent Confederate memory advocacy group. They were incredibly powerful. They controlled what happened in textbooks, what happened in museums and in monuments and in culture. They all come up to Fort Belvoir just 3.5 months after its renaming, and they dedicate a portrait of Robert E. Lee in Confederate gray. The band plays Dixie, and they say they hope it will be a guiding light to the engineers going forward. And even in the Belvoir archives, it's, because Lee was an engineer, its Belvoir portrait is of Lee in Confederate gray. And so, you know, certainly it's clear that the UDC was trying to actively make Belvoir a Southern fort, part of the Confederacy, part of this Confederate memory. You know, and ultimately, as I look at it, I think that my final comments, I'll conclude this, hopefully this, let's see, escape, stop share. Okay, you can see me now and I can see you, that's great. I'll conclude this just with my thoughts that coming to Belvoir as a relative outsider, it seems that a lot has been really done to date to commemorate the beauty of the plantation house, the fact that George Washington may have learned to be a gentleman there, learned how to survey there, but very little has been done to commemorate the fact that it was really an enslavement, enslaved area, that the enslaved people's names that we know of, names like Plato, were derogatory names given by slave owners to mock the enslaved, that we're going to give you the name of Plato or Pompey, the great Roman general, that we're going to give you this great name contrasted with your low status to kind of demean and laugh at you. And it really does seem to me that the Belvoir plantation, it commemorates everything that the Confederacy fought for, a landed aristocracy, enslavement, white supremacy, white male dominance, and it commemorates very little of what the United States Armed Forces represent today in terms of diversity and liberty and freedom for all. With that being said, I report to the commission, and they have, you can read about the commissioners on their website, so they can tell you all about, or you can read who they are. I'm sure they'll have questions, and they'll be the ones to make the determination. But that's kind of why Belvoir is in this. I really do appreciate all the good arguments that exist for Washington and the connection there, and the Quakers in Mount Vernon's area, and the unique area. But it's also then trying to go back to that foreign country of the past. What Roosevelt was doing in 1935, was he really making a favor to a friend of his that he had forgotten a promise he had made, or was using as a political tool and leverage in society that was pretty pro-Confederate, and in which Virginia meant something different than it does today, if that makes sense? Virginia was the cradle of the Confederacy, even though it was one of the last states to join it. And so I would love to take questions. I know I said a lot in a little bit of time, and love to hear feedback. And thank you for your attention.
So may I ask a question? Thank you, Connor. This is Subi Mehdi. I'm the commissioner from the Drainsville, one of the commissioners from the Drainsville district. That was a very, very, very interesting snapshot of how this naming convention is unfolding. And my question is, in terms of other historians who are looking at other naming or renaming of monuments, are you all using the same framework? How much commonality is there in the questions being asked and the key principles being applied here?
It's a great question, and I should say that unfortunately I can't speak about all of the commissioners' ongoings because they're a congressional commission which has different disclosure ideas. But certainly, so the law is that anything that commemorates the Confederacy, that commemorates anyone who voluntarily served the Confederate States, must be named. It's not a can it be renamed, it has to be renamed. So Fort Lee cannot remain Fort Lee. With that said, in gray areas, the commissioners, I think, are trying to look at what the principal legacy of individuals are. I'll use Robert Lee as probably the best known example. He was a engineer in the United States Army. He was a commandant of West Point. He did a lot of things as a United States soldier. But most of these forts are not named after him for being a United States soldier, named for him being a Confederate general. So that's kind of the large convention that they're looking on. So I think that's probably the best answer I can give right now. Is it largely comes down to principal legacy.
So just to follow up. So when those monuments were named, just say Robert E. Lee's, according to for him in his honor, was there a document that said that we are naming this house or this plantation or this fort to honor Robert E. Lee because he was a Confederate general? Is there a documentation, or is that an assumption?
Well, it's actually very interesting. I don't mean to do too much of a deep dive because Fort Lee's in Virginia, but much further south. For most forts, there was they were named taking local sensitivities into account. So the local individuals had a very large say in naming them. Fort Benning in Georgia was named because the United Artists Confederacy, the UDC, told them they wanted Fort Benning, and the Army said, sure, these are all open during the World War I, World War II. They were being very quick about them. The reason that Robert E. Lee is out is because he voluntarily served in the Confederate Army, if that makes sense. Same with Fort Bragg. Essentially, the laws were written such that because those men voluntarily served in the Confederate Army, nothing can be named after them. The exception might be if you have a book of the commandants of West Point, we're not tearing out the page that has Robert E. Lee in it because that's a part of historical narrative. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. That was mine. Thank you.
Connor,
yes.
This is Jordan Tannenbaum, one of the commissioners. I believe I served for a while at Fort Belvoir when I was in the military, and there was a Humphreys Hall on the grounds of Fort Belvoir. Is that still? I'm just curious. Is that still extant, and is it still named? Does it still carry the name? I'm assuming that's where the Humphrey name wound up. On that building.
I believe that is extant. I believe it's still named. I think that actually was built in the 50s or 60s. I was in the Fort Belvoir archives, and I should say that this journey's taken me a lot of different archives. I've definitely been hitting the ground. So that is still there. Fort Humphrey's name, actually, his name migrated across the river to DC to what's now Fort McNair. And for 15 years or so, that was called Fort Humphreys instead of the Washington Barracks. But then it got changed to Fort McNair in the late 40s, I believe. And so besides a defunct training camp in South Korea, Humphreys' name is not anywhere.
Thank you. It was fascinating.
Thank you, and I appreciate the chance to share.
I was just going to say, it does seem to me that perhaps it behooves us to stop naming anything for people.
I think a lot of people are saying that.
Yeah, it's something the Confederates, the Confederates Naming Commission is hearing a lot. I think that the right people can have an inspiring story, and that's something the commissioners have said often. But we have heard recommendations to name things Fort Texas, Fort Virginia, and yeah, I think that the reason behind this law, if I can interpret this as Connor Williams' private citizen, is that the bar of treason in the Civil War is pretty high, and that if we are naming our military installations to inspire the forces of tomorrow with the best of our past, we don't want to inspire them with people who committed treason and led the bloodiest rebellion against the nation. But certainly, I mean, we have all sorts of figures in our history. Yeah.
Somewhere I heard, and I can't believe that President Andrew Johnson would have said this, just given his record, but something he is quoted as saying, "There's nothing as odious as treason."
I think.
That's what
Yeah, no, I think that actually sounds like a Johnsonism, like circa 1865 or 64. He was making all the Confederate generals come to him for pardons. Then, of course, when he went to war with the radicals in Reconstruction, and I'm making a tangent now, but he changed his tune. Yeah.
So I would just add a couple things to. I really appreciate Connor being here. It's really wonderful for you to be here, and I know it's not the easiest thing given the parameters that you're given, and your statement at the beginning of your talk is very familiar to some of us on the commission, where when we go out and speak to a reporter or to a group, we often take off our history commission hat, and speak really only as private citizens. So we appreciate that. I just a couple of extra points, and you did talk about this later, is that the 1935 renaming was a renaming. As Cheryl had researched, the place was really referred to as Camp Belvoir or the camp at Belvoir, several different variations. And even after it was changed to Humphreys in 1918, they continued to have their mail sent to a different post office because people were so used to the name Camp Belvoir. And so I think it's a little bit tricky to say, they removed the name of Humphreys. Well, they removed the name of Belvoir before they removed the name of Humphreys, in 1935. So I think that's an important point that really should be brought out to the Naming Commission. I think that's something that should not get lost in the weeds, because that was Louis Hurtle's main motivation, is that he felt like that name had been unfairly removed. And the op-eds from 1935, I think maybe if you renamed Fort Belvoir back to Fort Humphreys, I think there's some people who would write that op-ed right now and say Humphreys is obscure. That's just, people hear about the big name generals, and that's who they have in their minds. So, that's just an extra point there. I will say from doing this research that that there's a lot of primary source evidence that corroborates the Hurtle renaming, and at least I have not found even one request from Howard Smith to rename the base, the post. So I haven't found anything. You can speak to that if there is evidence there. Carter Glass and Harry Bird, I haven't seen their name connected to anything with regard to Belvoir. So those are just a couple of extra things. I'm not as swayed by the gap between FDR agreeing to restore the name of Belvoir and waiting 300 days. There are people in this group that I've promised things back in, probably 300 days ago. And that does not affect my intent to do it. I intend to still do these things, but I owe them at this point. So, so for instance, if Harold Ickes came back from visiting Hurdle in December and said to FDR, hey, Hurdle is still bugging me about renaming this. When are we going to do it? That might have spurred him. But that gap does not is not terribly influential to me. So I'm not bothered by that. But anyway, so those are just some notes.
I think they're great, and Tammy and I have been speaking a good bit on this. The only response that I think I would make would be twofold. And one, just to clarify again, I know there's a lot of kind of confusion at Fort Belvoir as why are we being looked at all, if that makes sense. And so I was trying to use this presentation to show some of the reasons why that might be. To use kind of the tools of the historian. The name of Belvoir is interesting. The land's always been called Belvoir. And in 1915, 1916, the army sends some men out pre-World War I to fire rifles and, for lack of a better word, excuse the phrase, do soldier things on the lands of Belvoir. But as soon as they make it into an official army installation in 1917, it's Camp Humphreys, and then later Fort Humphreys. So it's the land is Belvoir, but the entity is Humphreys, I think. The 300 days, I don't. It does give pause. There are lots of reasons why it could have happened, and I think that's ultimately just kind of were it not for the fact that Southern legislators, took on a massive stand against Roosevelt in the weeks and days leading up to the name renaming, I wouldn't put too much suspicion there too. But that timing is there. And we do know that Smith was one of several congressmen who kept on saying, let's rebuild the plantation house. And then it kind of goes to, well, why do you want to rebuild the plantation house? I'm not saying they were nefarious, but their understanding of history was that plantation houses were beautiful and grand. There's a haunting picture of the 1951 Virginia residents recreating the wedding of Sally Fairfax or Lee. I came across in the archives, but they're people decked out in wigs and everything, because that's glorious. The word slave doesn't show up until the 60s and 70s. It's always the servants' hall. The servants' hall is in the basement, but they kind of forget about that. But I do agree that there's certainly a lot of areas, and I'll be presenting all these interpretations, to the commissioners for sure.
I'd like to make a point. My name's Elise Murray. That crew of people that you listed that might be associated with the renaming, I would rather not we be connected with that bunch of segregators, massive resistors. I really don't like that aspect of where the name might have come from. And if it did come from them, I would definitely vote for rename.
Well, I mean, and the Belvoir itself is a plantation. It's a physical place. I want to be very clear, if nothing else, I'm not putting forth any kind of ideas like the Da Vinci Code that if you use Belvoir through a certain cipher, it becomes Confederate or something like that. That's not my case. Yeah.
I think that's actually kind of one of the critical or difficult things here when we're talking about trying to understand culture and cultural, how do we as historians make arguments about how cultural currents affect events and choices? What evidence is sufficient to create that? Because it is by definition kind of ambivalent. It's like, well, you have to understand it was in the air at the time, and that's a hard argument to make. And I had done a pretty, I thought, comprehensive survey of those newspaper articles, and I missed those editorials. I completely overlooked them. They didn't come up in the search that I was doing, and they're, they kind of cast a different light on things a bit. So it's a really it's not an easy task, to undertake and to understand. I mean, and there is still, I mean, Tammy's points also are there as well. I mean, we don't have the, we don't have Glass or Smith clearly asking for this. There's no clear quid pro quo, but yes, Smith certainly was engaged in trying to, do something with Belvoir. And yeah, it does have that, the pretty Gone with the Wind, aura to it. So it's, yeah, it's a really difficult, sort of fascinating puzzle. Sorry, I don't know if there's anybody else who want to have any questions. Lynn, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to thank you, Connor, for your forthright connection to the plantation and everything that really was. I think that's a lot of why this is a discussion today. And golly, with everything that's on the table in terms of critical race theory and whatever, I'm really impressed and appreciate the fact that you've just kind of really cut to that aspect and reality of that plantation life. That's not something we want to embrace as a United States. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I think that speaking with Tammy, she mentioned, I didn't notice, but there's a chance that Justin Fairfax, Lieutenant Governor, is descended from one of the enslaved people of Belvoir, which is, yeah.
Right.
And the last thing I always say to folks, sorry, is, and you guys know it's from
That is,
all
I
the
believe, a fact that he is descended from one of the Fairfax slaves. It's been proven out.
Right.
Okay.
Well, he is emancipated by Thomas the Ninth, Lord of Fairfax.
Yeah.
Which is, we don't know that he's descended from a Fairfax family members enslaved people, but we don't know specifically that he's tied to Belvoir. But that's part of the problem, is that that Belvoir doesn't have a historian at this point. And while all of these other plantations that we live with in this area, Woodlawn and Mount Vernon and, all of these, Gunston Hall, all of these places have been doing research, and we can better tell those stories. Belvoir has, been hibernating over there because there's no historian there to take up that job of doing this interpretation that has largely happened in the last decade, sometimes 20 years ago, but a lot of it is the last decade. So that is really something that needs to happen, whether or not the name is changed. We really do need to kind of see how far we can trace. We have some of the names, and some of them were transferred to Carlisle House, another plantation, and so there's work that can be done there. I think we could make progress and find out maybe who some of these people were related to that might still be around.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing I would say, just that you've all pointed out, I know you've done a lot of work in getting that big slab of granite outside Fairfax Courthouse taken down and other things. So thank you for your service in all those really important works. I know you have another discussion about the Lee Jackson Highway, but that ultimately, memorialization, as a historian and as doing this work, what I hear the most from people is you're erasing history, and I always try to say we're not erasing history. As a teacher and a scholar, I will always teach about Robert E. Lee. You can't teach about America without it. But memorialization is really about our present and what our society wants to remember and wants to honor, and that's not the subject for Belvoir, but just this whole work in general is it's not changing the history, but it's affirming the society we want to have in the present and for our future. And so thank you for all the work you're doing with that and for hearing me and welcoming me here today.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
very
coming.
much, Connor. Really appreciate
Very
you
much
coming.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great.
And you're welcome to stay on and watch us struggle with the rest of our
Lee Jackson
agenda.
Or not.
I do have to state for the record that the History Commission was not responsible for and was not consulted with regard to the removal of the Marr Memorial. That was the Board of Supervisors and groups and people of Fairfax who pushed for that.
Right.
We weren't directly involved. That's just, like I said, for the record. Okay, so let's move on with our agenda. Thank you so much, Connor.
Thank you, Connor.
And you really,
Thank you.
that really was enlightening. Thank you.
My pleasure. I may sign off soon, but I'll try and stick around if I can.
Yeah, well, I appreciate kids going to bed, so we understand.
Absolutely.
All right, minutes. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes and pay the clerk?
So moved.
I moved, go ahead.
All right, so that was Lynn.
Yeah.
And I second.
Jordan seconds. Do we have all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed or abstentions? Motion passes. All right. And just for those of you who are not aware, that Elliot is actually in Edinburgh right now. He's working into the wee hours of the morning, recording us. All right. Treasurer's report, Barbara, we're going to skip that tonight, correct?
Yeah, I just want to say that there have been some staff changes and some communication problems, and we're getting on track, and I will have all the details by next month.
Can I ask a quick question, Barbara? Did you have enough information from me in regards to the plaques? Do you need me to send you anything else for the?
No, it's been submitted for payment.
They have been perfect. Okay, thank you.
There was just one, correct?
One payment for 2 plaques.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so our next item gets, isn't too, we haven't lost that train of thought that, from the presentation. We're going to talk about Fort Belvoir, and we had Tammy and I and Anne attended a listening session that the Naming Commission scheduled back in September. And, at that time, we did discuss before we attended as a commission whether or not we wanted to make any recommendation with regard to the renaming. And at that time, we determined that we'd lacked information. And that was one of the reasons why I invited Connor to come and speak about his results as a historian, sort of historian to historian conversation here, about what he has been finding. And Tammy can speak a little bit more about some of the things that she's been uncovering in her research. And what's on the agenda is really to whether or not we want to go back and reconsider that earlier decision to simply not make a recommendation, or whether the commission has, in light of the information that you'll hear tonight, wants to, reconsider that position and make a recommendation, or whether we should just sort of remain in our kind of neutral position. Go ahead, Tammy.
I was just going to talk to the fact that there's sort of two different pieces of this going on. So there are the obvious pieces of things that are named for Confederates that are going to be renamed and will need new names. And then there's Belvoir, which, as Connor said, is a gray area, no pun intended. So on Belvoir, there are 3 street names that are named for Confederates. Now I'm not sure I can come up with them. Stuart, Lee, do you remember, Connor, what the Stuart, Beauregard? Maybe Beauregard. In any case, there are 3 Confederate named streets. Now I do have to put it in context in that Fort Belvoir is very organized in its naming. They have sections that are named after the Quaker landowners that were there. There's a section that's named after different jobs that George Washington had: statesman, farmer, miller. And then there's this whole section on the North Post, which are, it's like a roll call of civil engineers throughout history. And so there must be, I don't know, 50 streets that are named after civil engineers throughout history. And there are 3 Confederate civil engineers that are listed in there. So that's how the name got there. And these were named, I think, pre-1930, that those names were applied. So, but anyway, but they're coming off. So we have to, or we have the opportunity to suggest different names for those if we want to. And that's going to be, I think, a local thing that happens. There is a website, that the Naming Commission has where we can, provide input there. if we would like to do it that way, or we can take a wait and see attitude and see if we want to suggest names for that, or just leave it up to the folks, at Fort Belvoir to do it. There is one other thing at Fort Belvoir that is named for Confederate, and that is the Mosby Reserve Center. And that's actually under the control of Army Reserve, which is separate. So the Army Reserves will be renaming that post. I do actually have kind of a strong opinion on that one, because it's a Army Reserve and Guard Center. And there was, in the Free Black community there that was working with the Quakers during the Civil War, they formed together the Accotink Home Guard. And so they were an armed interracial guard, which we believe it's the only one in the United States at that time period. And so I think it would be very appropriate for that to be named for the Accotink Home Guard. So that's kind of my personal position, in the Mount Vernon district. And so I don't know if others will have opinions on what to rename those.
Do you want to hear from us, Tammy? Did you want to hear from us now, or
sure? Let's have the discussion now.
Well, I don't know. It's a discussion. It's just a short recommendation. Yeah. And one of the things we'll learn on Saturday at the history conference is there were three basic Indian, Native American tribes that called this land home. So let me just toss out the suggestion that those three tribes be included as potential namings.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, because as we know, Dogue Creek is right there. So I think that's a good suggestion. Mary, did you have another?
I was going to say there is another home guard. The Falls Church Home Guard was interracial. Okay?
Really? That's
yes. Cool. But the other thing is, my personal opinion, I would rather the History Commission remain neutral and do your individual responses, because we don't know what's coming down the pike. If this is going to become a habit with everything that's being renamed, is the History Commission going to ask to opine on it? And so, I was saying, as individuals, we can certainly express our own opinions, but that's just a suggestion from me.
That's a really good suggestion, Mary, that we could just get in the business of giving opinions on renamings, and that could take up a lot of our time. That is a good point. So Cheryl has shared with you all before the Naming Commission's website. And so, we can resend that out, and everybody individually can do that if that's what we want to do. For the larger Fort Belvoir, I don't know if, Mary, if you intended for your comment to apply to the renaming of Fort Belvoir as well, or just for the smaller things. So I think that's reasonable.
I felt like for Fort Belvoir, I would prefer to do it individually, just for those reasons.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Remaining neutral on options that we might consider for names is one thing, but I'm not so sure that the commission should remain neutral on the question of whether something should be named. I don't think you were saying that we should remain neutral as to whether or not something should be changed.
No.
Okay,
No.
You're just saying in terms of what might be selected.
I see what you're saying.
I just want to make sure that we all understood that Mary was only talking about names to be considered, but not necessarily. I think that the commission needs to affirm, following up on Elisa's comment earlier, that and I'm not so sure about Belvoir. I mean, but with respect to any other streets or buildings on the military facility that are related to those who were actively fought in the Confederacy, I think the commission should affirm that all of those should be changed to something else.
That's a done deal. That is happening.
All right.
Okay. But I appreciate you clarifying that, because I did misunderstand Mary's point. So I appreciate that clarification. But yes, everything that is named for a Confederate on Fort Belvoir and any any post in the US will be changed. That is happening. That's mandated. So, which is very
yes. So the question that I just didn't want to necessarily continue with the presumption, that I wanted to give you the opportunity to, and this is not so much for the naming commission, because we're not the advisors for the naming commission. We are the advisors for the board of supervisors. And I think that, they were taken by surprise at the idea that Fort Belvoir was going to be was on the list of potential renamings. And so, what are we advising to them, with regard to what sort of, what sort of position to take? And maybe there isn't a position to take at all. Maybe we just, I just continue to say, we don't have a specific recommendation with regard to the name, but here's lots of information about that history, and allow people to make their own choice. So I just, if the commission wanted to take a stand on this, either, for renaming Belvoir or against renaming Belvoir, I wanted to give you that opportunity to do that, because if we write something up, their deadline, I believe, is December 1st, Tammy?
That is for suggesting names. I think Belvoir is it's a gray area, and I think the discussions on that are going to go forward. I don't think Connor is finished with his historical research. So it may be too early to say anything, to make a decision one way or the other, unless people felt strongly. So I think it's ongoing. I don't know. They had a requirement to reach out to stakeholders to get a sense of how people felt. I don't think that they have to. I don't think that the naming commission is required to get approval or assent from stakeholders. I think it was a courtesy that they came out to visit.
Yeah, no, as I said, this really, we would be, our comments would be addressed to the Board of Supervisors.
Right, right, yes, and that's true. But and most of the supervisors, from what we could tell, with the exception of Supervisor Harity, who opposed the renaming, the rest of the supervisors appear to be in listening mode. They're like us, where they're sort of trying to take it all in and understand exactly where the facts are in this, and where it leads.
Sure, Barbara.
In listening to all this, everything is based on assumptions, and it's wonderful research, but there's, the statement, we are naming this because, is not there. And so Connor did a fascinating work. I appreciate what you and Tammy have done. And I think I could argue each one of those cases, because it's their assumptions, and you're dealing with cultural history or intellectual history. It's very difficult, and we're attempting, and I think he's done a good job of putting now into the mindset of then. And so there always have to be caveats. And so with all of that in mind, I don't think we actually have the hard facts to vote as the commission.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, individually, we certainly should speak up. And it's for the streets on Fort Belvoir, yes, but this is starting the whole thing. So anyway, that's my thoughts. It's just gray, mushy, whatever you want to say, but it's
and
so those are my thoughts. Thank you.
I had a comment as well, Cheryl.
Go ahead, Ann.
Which was, so often with these things, the people who know the best are the ones who come forward with a recommended motion. And I'm not hearing either of you guys with a settled opinion yet. So that would be the other reason not to make a statement at this time, because we're all still figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the decision may be made well before it is figured out, or maybe it'll never be figured out. But I think that there's always, yeah. But I could just see that you're not jumping to say, we should write this motion that says, no, you're not doing that.
Right, right.
You're giving a very balanced look at it, and I appreciate that. It's tough. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments about this? So I don't know that we need a motion to sort of continue doing what we've been doing.
Let her ride.
Because that sort of sounds like that's where we're going. I mean, you know, if you're interested, you know, Tammy and I can continue to do a little bit more research. I mean, I keep feeling like there are a couple of rocks that should be turned over and take a look at, but
yeah.
You know, I mean, I appreciate what Elise said about, you know, if this is, you know, if the naming really was done to, you know, as part of that, you know, to satisfy that group of folks, it's makes it far less comfortable. But
we don't know.
Yeah,
we don't know. We don't know. And I completely agree with Barbara that so much that's being taken as evidence is really assumptions.
That's right. That's right.
And it's hard to tease apart, you know, this patriotism and appreciation for founding fathers and the lost cause. It's hard to tease that apart because, you know, certainly I have the writings about Belvoir from some Civil War soldiers, and they're, you know, really very in awe of Belvoir, but at the same time going to fight for the Union Army and speaking out very in a very derogatory way about the children of some of the founding fathers and grandchildren, George Mason's grandsons specifically. And they're really very derogatory about that while lauding, you know, the Belvoir Manor plantation. So, you know, the appreciation for the founding fathers doesn't necessarily equal lost cause. And that's where it's really difficult to separate out those things.
Well, I think then in that case, because he's a scholar and he's taking a scholarly view, the biases should be acknowledged up front. I mean, that's what I would expect from a scholarly presentation, that these are the assumptions, these are the biases, this is where we have the evidence, because I asked him for documentation and he couldn't answer that. So, but anyway, all in all, I learned a lot. Thank you.
Yes, very informative.
I'd like to add a point that hasn't been brought up, and that is that the Fairfax family and the Washington family were intermarried. They were not just friends. And Fairfax was married to Lawrence Washington, Washington's brother. So there is that connection. The other thing is looking at the real world today, things that we have to do today. There is a threatened archaeological site, Belvoir, that has kind of disappeared into the base and is sometimes overgrown. And having the name Belvoir be on the base protects this site. It contributes to people being aware that it's there.
And sorry, Mary, and I apologize to folks who are not actually on screen. If I overlook you, just shout out like Xylee just did. Thank you. Go ahead, Mary.
He's muted.
Okay, I just think the research that all of you have done needs to be in the Virginia room for future generations to see, you know, the research you've done, and if this comes up in another 50 years, you know, that, hey, we want to change it back to Belvoir or whatever, that it's there for people to look at what scholarly, and also if he would be willing to just, you know, give you a copy of his screen and add that to it to show what his research was done at the same time.
I think that's an excellent point, Mary, and that's something that actually Connor and I have talked about, because, for instance, if you go out right now in current media to look up, you know, where the Belvoir name came from, the only thing that's out there in the media right now is General Sedgley's op-ed, which basically says very boldly, FDR renamed Belvoir to appease Howard Smith. And I felt like that's a pretty bold statement given the evidence. And it says nothing about Lewis Hurdle, who we actually have primary source evidence. FDR wrote a letter, you know, saying, I've done it, I've restored the name. And so I think even before it goes in the Virginia room, this historical research needs to be brought out into the public. We need to make sure that maybe there are newspaper articles written about it. It needs to be covered in a way that everybody sees this full picture. I mean, it's a very complicated picture that brings in tourism and road building. Lewis Hurdle's motivations were to extend the Mount Vernon Memorial Parkway past Mount Vernon through Belvoir to Gunston. That was his motivation for really being very persistent about this. And so so there is a lot here. You know, that was, Connor was wonderful in showing us everything he did, but it's a 10-minute talk where, you know, there is a lot more information that goes behind this and many more players involved. So
Sally, do you have your hand up? And then Barbara? Was it Sally who has her hand up?
Yes, it
I had
was.
to say already.
Oh, okay. So you just had your hand, the little
Still up,
graphic.
yes.
Okay, Barbara, sorry. Thank you.
One other thing, this is another op-ed, and the author was Lee and Me, and he is a new raised Southerner, and therefore discovered this and was not, as far as I'm concerned, aware of local history beyond his immediate attacking the myth of Lee. So that too is not a full understanding of the complexities of the situation. So anyway, that just is a PS to what I said to begin with.
I do. I think that's part of the story, and I hope that if the naming commission decides to change the name, that they will also participate in getting the full story out there with their rationale. Like Mary says, I mean, this would be an important thing and would be an important precedent if they decided to change that. I mean, that's, you know, it's taking a next step beyond the Confederacy, I think. So anyway, I think Mary's point is very good. One further thing that I have to tell you, just because we're the History Commission, I did discover in the Mount Vernon archives that the 250th anniversary of Fairfax County was celebrated at the Belvoir Manor. Donald Swig gave the keynote address and he went back and said, you know, this is William Fairfax, and in 1742 he went down to Williamsburg and said we should create Fairfax County. So, but anyway, I just thought I would mention that. It was because we're the History Commission.
And it is a National Register site, which hasn't been mentioned. The physical place is on the National Register.
Absolutely. All right.
And Archaeology and Collections do hold the artifact from Fort Belvoir, but the earliest investigations, the artifacts were lost in the early to mid 20th century.
Interesting.
Prior to them coming to Fairfax County.
All right. Well, it sounds like everybody has had their piece said on this, and it sounds like we're not moving toward a motion of any kind.
Okay.
So we'll move on then.
All right. So we do have a next item on the agenda is to continue the discussion of names. Here we are at least clearly discussing a Confederate name, or Confederate names, specifically Sue Kovach and I, sorry, Sue Schumann and I are on the task force for Confederate names, and specifically to whether or not to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the names of Lee Highway and Lee Jackson Highway be renamed within Fairfax County. And Sue, do you want to update on? We're going to have Sue update us on the Confederate name task force, and I think Barbara has a motion that we might consider, or we can have some discussion and then play it out. But but I don't want to necessarily spend a lot of time.
I agree. We have 4 more meetings on this, and we are expected on November 15th to come up with some kind of vote on whether or not to change the name. We are still doing listening sessions, 4 listening sessions, and I've attended 2. And no surprise, most people don't really want to show up. They send emails. And I found out late this afternoon that the county now has 6,500 returned survey comments just online. So it's really one of the more successful kind of surveys that they have done. The Transportation Department is just delighted. The postcard telling people about what's happening is still not distributed to the 451,000 households. Has anyone, you got yours?
I got mine too.
I
Yeah.
sent a
Thank you.
picture to
I got
Cheryl
mine.
so she could see it. Yes, it came
Well,
yesterday.
and I live 4 miles, not even 4 miles, no, 3 miles from the Merrifield Post Office. And those things were sitting on plaques Thursday night while I was at the meeting, and I still don't have my postcard.
3 languages. 3 languages.
Yes, yes.
What's the third language? Is it
Korean.
I think it's
Korean?
Korean. Yes.
It was really well done.
Yes,
it was
it is.
really well done.
Good. That was one of the horrible public engagement strategy things, that and the survey, which doesn't exactly, is not perfect, but it's a good piece of information. What we're learning so far, we don't really have a consensus from people, but the listening sessions have been really interesting. Someone pointed out that, street names have a powerful political impact, and cited places around the world where that's done. And we hadn't really thought about that. Other people are saying that we should get past the Civil War. And in fact, in some of my own research, right here on stretches of Lee Highway, you have wonderful horse farms and barns and stables and a lot of other things besides the Civil War. We're not kind of getting to that yet in this discussion with the task force. People are concerned about cost, both on the task force members, and members of the public. The transportation head said it will cost $1 million minimum and maybe $4.2 million to get new signs, to do all that. And that is not what we are being asked to look at. But of course, it comes in because of the pandemic, and some businesses are still decimated. They're not up to what they had been. So we're not looking at that part, but that is more of a discussion than I think the task force members anticipated. The other thing is, there are several members of the task force, and I think Cheryl and I would agree, who came into this with good knowledge, good history background, and at least one person has received a prestigious History Commission award in the past. So he is educating us about what happened and during the Civil War and why names are what they are. I'm not sure that we will come to any unanimous decision on this task force, but I also think that November 15th is coming really close, and Cheryl and I don't know, are we expected to vote for the History Commission? Are we expected to vote as public citizens for this recommendation to move on? Because on November 8th, we are supposed to look at alternative names, and some names have been coming in from the public. But November 15th, we would like guidance on what we should do. Should we be neutral? Should we vote?
Sue, were you invited as history commissioners or public?
Yes, history
Yeah,
commissioners.
So I think you
Yeah,
should
we
vote for the
were
commission.
representing the History Commission. We were selected because of that. I mean, it isn't in some of as it trickles down through the administration. It isn't all. I don't know how clear that was made, but that was the staff's recommendation when staff was helping the board to bring this board matter into reality, and so we are, my understanding is that we are representing the History Commission, which is why we're looking to you.
So I would think then you certainly represent the commission, but I noticed, I just received mine today, and I noticed that the input will be accepted until next Friday. That's really not very much time.
Which was my point exactly today when I asked about this. And like I said, I'm really close here. I could walk down to that post office and have my postcard already. So that doesn't give people much time. If my zip code that close by is not getting it.
Yeah.
And, I hated to ask more about specific how this is done. It might just be my mail carrier has it sitting on the truck. I don't know.
No, I think most people probably did, unless I'm wrong here. It did get it with less than, with only, it was less than 2 weeks
That's right.
to respond.
That's
That
right.
doesn't seem fair, actually. And
Mhm.
so I would move, as a commission member, I would say, hey, look, we need to give people more time on this, and you know, to accept public comments, that is. So.
Well, we really did have a short timeline on this. November 12th, that survey closes, and people already are sending emails. And in the last 3 days, Robin Geiger from the Transportation Department personally fielded 100 phone calls and comments as of 5 o'clock today from people who are calling in. And some of the people who call in, and you must give your name and such. Some want to be anonymous. I guess they're kind of, you know, playing it if people really want to be that way. They're kind of keeping a tally for us to give us some information on Monday night as to where we are now. And they also will have some raw numbers on the survey. But, you know, it's not a statistical thing. It's not everybody in the county who is being asked to weigh in on this. So it's more of a public sentiment. We don't have anything yet, yes or no.
So we were mandated to come up with a recommendation by December. And, you know, one of the earliest comments that from the task force, you know, was this is not enough time because we only started in September. And we've just basically been told this is what the timeline is. I mean, we could still make a statement, you know, about it, but that's, you know, that's the timeline we've been given. This survey is not a representative survey. It is not a scientifically designed survey. It's a random, self-selected, you know, kind of happening. Sorry.
Where did they?
We worked hard to put. Sorry.
It's a well-designed survey. I think Sue, you guys actually did a nice job of coming up with decent survey questions. It's just the sampling. There is no sampling design. It's the self-selected. So you can't generalize from the sample to the population. It's just
right. And some people will be more inclined to reply than others.
Well, and like most of us, if we get a postcard, we're going to put it on the counter somewhere and come back in a week. And so Jordan's point is well taken. That's not much. We did feel, the task force, that we needed this public engagement subgroup, which I was on with 6 or 7 people. And I think that some task force members thought, well, we are appointed there. Put there already by a supervisor. So why do we need this public engagement? But I strongly felt we don't make this decision in a vacuum. We really need that public input. And I think that it's playing out. It's just a really short time frame for all of that. And there's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied. They want something done by December 20th. The decision, I'm not a decision, I'm sorry, a recommendation. So, Anne, you have your hand raised.
I'm gonna wait. I know Barbara has Barbara Peters and Ann Stuntz each had their hands, and then Barbara Nath. So let's go it that way.
Okay.
Barbara Peters first.
Okay, I think I am really concerned. While I would like to see these particular roads have the name changed, I think that the cost really has to be something that people are aware of when they are making recommendations or suggestions for changing it. And the fact that that isn't really been a part of what you're being asked to consider is stunning to me.
We were told that the Board of Supervisors would get this money somehow afterwards, and that we shouldn't be concerned with that. But there are task force members and members of the public who rightly are concerned. We're not talking about just 1 million to 4.2 million is a huge amount of money. So your point is valid. We're told we're not supposed to, but you know, we're keeping it in mind.
Go ahead, Anne.
I was just gonna, just in a small amount of shock, just looking back at the time frame. So we get the postcard late. We have until sometime on the 12th to get public comments in, and then you guys have 3 days to absorb it and do whatever you need to do to look at the thousands of responses. I think that's a tough job, you guys.
These are not easy task force meetings. I have been in some other DEI training and other things, as Gretchen knows. You come out and you're just exhausted. You are. You feel you've made progress, but very incremental each time. We're slogging right now.
It just doesn't even seem doable. It seems like it's being rushed.
Well, that's
Can
true.
I? Okay, I spent a lot of time, about two and a half hours, thinking about this and what the commission's role is, and so I was going to do a motion, but I just want to make some points, and it's up to you all. But first of all, the question is one: should Lee Highway and Lee Jackson names be changed? The cost and all of that is not the issue of the History Commission. The History Commission needs to say either say yes, or we think they should be changed, or not. I think we have to say, my perspective is that we say yes, they need to be changed. The two names are honorific. They come as part of at a time when the lost cause myth is a very powerful public force. I look at what Denise sent us. All the jurisdictions around us have gone through their process and said, yes, we're changing the names. If you look at Cheryl pointed out, the National Trust, which we way back when supported their position as our position, right? These are honorific names that is glorifying them by naming places about them. It's not like our markers, which are saying right here, this happened, and it happened for, we went through all that. Think again of our 500 and some pages and the perspective we offer there. So I feel very strongly that the commission, whatever the public says, and I took, one of the things that took so long is I went through most of the responses that Cheryl sent so that we could read them, and one of them that's just,
thank you.
These figures are chosen for their important contributions to society. That is in support of Robert E. Lee Highway. All right. Again, this is, think about the Confederate names inventory, which we all voted on and agreed to. Think of the mentality of the lost cause. This is part of it. All right. So I would be happy to put forth a motion saying that the History Commission, in following in the spirit of the Confederate names inventory report and 1 Fairfax, recommends that the names be changed, and stop right there. And
I
if that,
second.
you want that to be a motion, all right, it's seconded.
Who was seconded? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Was that Lynn?
And
Oh, it was Ann? Okay, sorry. I just didn't quite catch who had said that.
You just didn't
Dave
believe it.
had
No.
his hand up.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor that the commission recommend that the names be changed. And that's been properly seconded, so we have discussion. I see, David has had his hand up for a bit, and then Tammy.
I just wanted to share with the commission where the city of Fairfax is, and I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but we had a citizens group look at this issue for about 9 months, and they came in with 3 categories of recommendations. One was changing the historic markers within the city. The second was changing the city seal, which has this Confederate soldier on it. And then, Lord Fairfax, the 6th, not the 9th, who freed his slaves, but the 6th, who was a notorious slave owner. But then the last one was changing street names. This is proving to be the most vexing part of the recommendation. And we are working through that. And I want to add parenthetically that while there are costs associated, and I agree with Barbara that the commission shouldn't be concerned about the cost. There are costs for not changing names. Businesses whose address is Lee Jackson Memorial Highway, for candidly, depending on what kind of business it is, that could have, from a marketing perspective, a negative economic impact on that business. We have several streets in this, well, we have 26 streets that we're under consideration. One is Confederate Lane. And I've had residents call me up and said, for God's sakes, change the name. I'm getting ready to retire and I'm going to sell my house. I can't sell my house when it sits on Confederate Lane. So there are economic problems and impacts for not changing names. But with respect to Lee Highway and Lee Jackson, two things. One, Paige Johnson has written a pretty thorough essay on how Lee Highway became Lee Highway in 1923, and that was very helpful to us. And secondly, Lee Highway runs from the Potomac River all the way through Arlington, through Fairfax County, through what is now the city of Fairfax, and US 29 goes all the way through the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so I have been in conversations with both Dahlia Palchek and James Walkinshaw about if the county were to change the name of Lee Highway, that we ought to, from a regional perspective, make it consistent, those portions of Lee Highway that are in the city of Fairfax be consistent with whatever the county comes up with. It's not that whatever the county comes up with, we're going to agree to it. I mean, we're going to have our input with it too, as well. But we've already changed Lee Highway in the city of Fairfax. It's Fairfax Boulevard, but there are these two weird sections from Fairfax Circle up to Blake Lane and from Camp Washington west to Waples Mill Road, which are not Fairfax Boulevard, and we've got to change those. And we want to do that in concert with the county. So we're trying to coordinate our citizen panels and our review, and of course, Arlington has already renamed Lee Highway in Arlington, Langston, and so we're still working through all of that. But I just wanted to share that with you to say that we do have a stake in this, and we're working collaboratively with the county. I don't think there's anybody in the city of Fairfax who is opposed to changing the name of Lee Highway to something else. And we also have, just for another footnote to a footnote, we have the original Lee Highway is now called Old Lee Highway, runs from the circle down to the center of town. And I live 3 houses from Old Lee Highway, and I live in Old Lee Hills. Please. So we are hopefully going to work through the renaming of Old Lee Highway, but that doesn't have anything to do with the county. But I just wanted to share that with you that we are in the thick of this challenge, and we are going to coordinate with the county relative to Lee Jackson Memorial Highway.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anne? I mean, I'm sorry, not Anne, Tammy.
Oh, yes. So I go back, like Barbara, to our Confederate names work that we did, because I feel like we did really good work on that. And one of the things that I go back to again and again is our idea of this, of the different, ways that we have named streets. Like some of them are labels in that, Lee lived here, and some of them are, memorializations and glorifications, all the way along this spectrum. And while it is true that some of Lee Highway goes past, Arlington House, and then past Lexington, which are both meaningful areas to Lee. I think really, the article that David was just talking about by Page Johnson, William Page Johnson, was very helpful in understanding how it got its name fully. And so really, I think it very much is on the glorification part of the spectrum. And so so that's where, my decision making comes from. And then also the idea of young people having to deal with going to a school that is named for a Confederate or living on a street that is named for a Confederate. That weighs very heavily on me. So so I would say for those reasons, I appreciate the fact that it was named Lee Highway at the time period, and the balance between the Lincoln Highway and the Lee Highway, north and south. I think the time is right for it to be changed. So that's where I'm coming from.
Jordan and then Mary.
Yeah, I think we should probably call the question soon. I think we're probably going to be all unanimity here. But my next question, Sue and Cheryl, is in addition to going and saying, yes, we feel it should be changed, are they expecting you to submit suggestions on behalf of the commission? And if so, how do we want to handle that?
Well, so far, we don't know what members of the public have discussed, but task force members have said perhaps we shouldn't name a person, and perhaps we should look at Native Americans and other things here that have some meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I thought
actually,
Lynn's suggestion was good.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I like Lynn's suggestion, and maybe that's something we would want to suggest.
What was that?
To name it after an Indian tribe.
Oh,
Native American tie-in.
Native American.
Yeah, we did think of that, and the history conference, of course, is going to be focusing on some of that, as Lynn pointed out earlier. But yeah,
and then perhaps something to indicate that you're renaming Lee Highway, something like reunion, or something to bring together the idea that we're healing from the Civil War, like just some quality, naming it for quality. As we talked about, like, I'm not big on a person.
No, and I agree, and we did kind of go through some of that, as Cheryl knows. There's enough feeling that we need to move past what was there already and have something that is healing.
Mary, go ahead.
I support the motion fine. I just have a recommendation for the county. As the developers come in to do their developing, tell us what their name's origin is. Peep-toed Court really bothers me. I'm glad I don't live on Peep-toed Court. But anyway,
I actually know somebody who lives on Peep-toed
Yeah, I do.
Court.
I do too.
Me too. Me too.
So, but just for future reference, again, this is the good old history teachers talking. Get it down in writing so that we don't have to do this 50 years from now. We say we can tell you how this was named and why it was named that way.
That would be wonderful if the county could actually do that. My favorite is Easy Living Lane.
What is it?
Easy Living Lane.
Oh.
My kids are really enamored of Illuminati Way.
Oh, and there's 2nd Street, but there's no 1st.
Do we have any further discussion? I don't want to exclude anyone who wishes to make a comment about this or to go ahead, Barbara.
This is one other thing, and the motion stands. I think if that's the motion, and then if we need to think of names, that's another issue.
Right, yes.
If we don't get it in time for their deadline, then that's unfortunate. But that's not what our primary charge is. So that's
yes. So any further discussion? Let me see. JT, who is that?
That's
Jordan. No.
Jordan.
No, okay.
Sorry, I didn't.
Tammy, okay, you guys just haven't put your hands back down.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go through the participants. People who are calling in, Carol, Steve, any comments? Bob, I know you are there somewhere that you snuck in. Did you?
I'm fine, Carol. It's
okay.
Fine.
Okay.
This is Esther. I finally called in. I can see
Hi,
you,
Esther.
but I can't be seen. So I'm fine.
Okay. All right. So we'll call the question. And Barbara, can you restate that that motion for me? You made it so short and sweet.
I don't know that the words will be the same if Elliot has it written down. Does he?
Elliot, did you record that vote, that motion?
I did, yes. Would you like me to read it or provide
I would
it?
appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. The History
With
Commission.
a Scottish brogue. With a Scottish brogue.
I'm still working on it.
Wearing
Give me a
kilt,
couple more days. The History Commission, in the spirit of the Confederate Names Inventory Report and the One Fairfax Policy, recommend that the names of Lee Jackson and Lee Highway be changed.
Period. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. All right.
And
And it's
Cheryl,
only-
I have a question. I sent you a note very late because the listing of the various county agencies and groups that were on this list that were involved, it did not include the commission.
Yes, so I'm not entirely sure how, I know that staff recommended that the History Commission be involved in this task force as the History Commission. And I'm not sure that that got translated down to the weeds of the facilitators and
This is the weeds thing, but I think it's interesting since we're being asked to comment that we are not on that list.
well, I mean, I don't, Sue and I did not feel like we could sit there on the commission and substitute our personal opinions for you, that we're representing the commission and that, we needed this vote in order to say one.
Absolutely right. Their error that they should list us as, so anyway.
Yes, actually, no, that's a good point, Barbara. We'll have to, we'll bring that up with their staff.
It was an interesting task force because it's the first one I've been on where people don't really know each other or introduce each other or anything or say I'm so-and-so and this is my background, even though everyone there has an affiliation and few are just public citizen.
Right.
Yes, I did want, and I don't know if I can, I have thought about possibility because some people are very concerned about, and you see this in the public comments, the loss of history. And while I agree that a name that is an honorific is different and distinct, very different and distinct from history. I mean, we all know there are lots of historical figures I can name who don't have monuments to them that we know of because we study history and not street names in order to learn history. But one thing that I did think, and this would add to the cost, but we could do, or we could recommend to the task force that they include in their recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that some sort of public history be done on the history of Lee Highway, going back to its origins as, a colonial turnpike through, its contemporary, debate over renaming. I don't recommend that we do it. I think they should find a consultant to do it.
I second that motion, the whole thing.
We're out of the business.
Call back Connor. Give Connor a call.
So I don't know if you want to make that a motion and make that part of our formal recommendation or not.
I think that's reasonable. I think
it's another motion. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a good one.
So if I may clarify, is that amending the current motion?
No. This is an entirely separate motion, and I can hand the gavel over to Lynn to make it myself, or why don't we do it that way? That'll be fast. So I would like to move that in our recommendation to the Task Force on Confederate Names, that the History Commission recommends that they recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they consider hiring an appropriate consultant to develop a public history portion, either a series of markers, historical markers, or some other sort of appropriate public history outreach for preserving the history of Lee and Lee Jackson highways.
I second the motion.
Tammy seconds.
Yeah.
Lynn, you have to call the.
You're muted.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. Unfortunately. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained? Motion carries.
All right. Thank you so much, Lynn. You can give me back that
You,
gavel.
you do realize though, Cheryl, that it will come back to bite us.
Well, I do specifically want, that it not be be given to the History Commission.
But it will.
I mean, we may wind up being, participants in the process, but I think it should be, there are people who get paid well to do this and who do this well. And I also think that it should, this is a way that they could include other groups as well, that it not just be a History Commission thing.
Can I jump in now? I didn't vote, I didn't abstain, I didn't do anything because I'm thinking. It will come back to bite us. I also think that on that task force now, there are several people who don't necessarily feel the names should be changed, who would jump at that job to do that kind of history from what we're seeing.
Which is why we would, which is one reason why I think, a professional consultant should be specified. And, and then those kinds of groups and people can be incorporated, but not define it. David, sorry.
Oh, I would just suggest that we somewhat deftly plant the idea with a couple of sympathetic supervisors that they get a professional consultant to do that. So it's all part of one motion that the board would take.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we can move on. Thank you. Thank you. I know that this is a crowded agenda. I'm hoping in December things will start to unravel a little bit and we can actually get a meeting done in a reasonable hour. Marker Contest Committee, Marker Contest update, Mary.
Very quickly.
I'm sorry. There's somebody else speaking in the background.
Elliot, I just wanted to double check. Was Barbara Nafe's motion voted on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unanimous.
That was
I
unanimous.
apologize. I missed that. That was where my confusion was coming
Unanimous.
from.
It's okay, Elliot. It's getting to be what, 2 o'clock in the morning for you?
The gavel was passed quietly.
Yes. All right. Go ahead, Mary. Thank you.
I'm going to be really fast. Just 2 things is that we've realized it's now November and we do not have a contest framework. So Tammy and I and Ramona Carroll, who's with the Neighboring and Community Services, and Arye from Supervisor Palchek's office are going to be a small committee to make a framework to get all this, contest information out there to the committee as a whole, so we can move forward. We're spinning our wheels a lot in committee meetings, which has 10 or 15 people on it, and so we will be doing that in the future. The voting committee has not been selected, but I did ask Arye what was the plans for this, who was going to be writing the markers, and he thought that the voting committee might do that. And so my suggestion to him was that they better announce that to whomever they ask to be on the voting committee, that they're hoping at the other end that they'll help write the markers. So I will not forget that suggestion.
Did you explain to them what writing the markers means?
Oh, I have many times. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the marker committee process, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. Yeah. Charts and everything, Barbara. So yeah. Okay. That's it for the marker contest.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. It's an ongoing saga. There are some really interesting components of this. It's kind of expanded, and we've got, I think I've said this before, Neighborhood Community Services is going to be doing some really interesting outreach. So that part of it is exciting. All right, Jordan, you wanted to share something about Sky Chef Building for Dulles Airport Historic District.
Yeah, real quickly, I don't know if you remember a number of meetings ago, I mentioned that the FAA, Washington Metropolitan Airport Authority, they're planning a demolition of a building within the, it's called the Sky Chef Building within the Dulles Historic District. We have, and they've circulated a draft MOA, which everybody has until November 7th to make comment on this. And I was able to get some draft comments to Cheryl over the weekend, fairly detailed comments about the various stipulations. In summary, I'll just give you three of the overriding questions that I asked before I got into stipulation by stipulation. Number one, I asked whether or not the current space could be suitable for other functions, pointing out that it is original fabric. And I don't think what the function is that they decide to do is significant. The function was significant if they prepared airline meals there. It just needs to be an airfield support function, be rectilinear, be metal clad with a flat roof, and be in Dulles gray. So I don't know to what extent they've looked at that, at reuse options. We were invited into this as a consulting party fairly late in the game, but I have been in touch with the individual who is handling that, but it's now beginning to move quickly. I think we brought this up in July. That's when I heard about it. Hasn't really moved until just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. The other was there's no requirement to comply with NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. I asked a question, why not? It's a federal undertaking. And the third is I didn't see that the FAA was ensuring that these stipulations would be carried out. They're the federal agency, of course, they're responsible for 106. So then I go into some detail, which we don't have want to spend time on tonight. But if we are going to submit a comment, we need to do it quickly. November 7th is Sunday. So this is the one time that we have to decide if we want to enter into this and submit comments in the consultation period.
What are your recommendations?
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interfere there, Barbara. Go ahead, say what you say.
I wondered if Jordan had recommendations as whether we should or should not.
Yeah,
I think we should. Having spent a couple of hours going over the documents, I think we should. I think we should raise these questions. One might say, oh, it's just a building where they prepared meals, big deal. That's an industrial building. But I think these are legitimate comments to ask in this situation. Yeah, I do.
I will say, Jordan, looking at the MOA earlier today, it does look like they don't have any specific plans to, replace it with something else. They just want to demolish it. So I don't know if there's structural, issues that are, or I mean, I don't know why they'd want to take it out. There's no explanation as to why they would want to demolish it.
Right. Yeah, okay. That I have no documentation beyond an initial letter that they were doing this and then the draft MOA. Okay. There is a part of a stipulation that concerns me, which says that if for some reason they can't get enough money to do what they want to do, then they don't have to do it.
Right.
That's pretty in your face. So I think, and that was stipulation number 5. I talk about the various levels of cost estimates that they look at, and we need to know more about that, because that's an escape clause that I don't think we want to see in the MOA. So
do you want to make a motion, Jordan, about this?
Well,
do you want to phrase this as a motion?
Yeah, well, I would move that the Fairfax County History Commission submit comments to the Washington Metropolitan Airports Authority on the proposed demolition of the Sky Chef building at Dulles Airport. Do so before the end of the comment period on November 7th.
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Okay.
Quick.
And Cheryl, when you send these comments, if they're okay as I wrote them, feel free obviously to revise as you see fit. But you should also copy the SHPO and copy the advisory council. And I would copy John Byrne, John Burns and his team for sure.
Okay. All right, and hearing no further discussion. Is that correct? Let's give anybody an
Would this
opportunity.
also, this is Esther. Would
Thank you,
this
Esther.
also go to the board of supervisors?
Oh yeah, I guess.
Yes, we would.
Right.
Automatically.
Per our policy, we would copy
Right.
the relevant board members.
Right.
I had a question.
Ann, go
I
ahead.
had a question. Is it John Burns? He's not chair anymore, is he?
I think you may be right. Elise, do you know?
It's
Lisa
Chris
probably do
Daniels.
know.
It's Chris Daniels.
Oh, Chris is the chair. Great. Even better. He works for the council. So
I know. And he's a Restonian. He's involved in the Reston Comprehensive Plan Survey.
Yes.
All
Yes,
good.
he
All
is. Yes, he is. Good guy. Good guy.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion to submit comments on the MOA signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. All right, I will basically cut and paste Jordan's paragraphs, which I can't pretend I fully understand, but I get about 75%.
Neither. That's okay, Cheryl. Neither do I.
No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't do it if I didn't understand it.
I can ask any questions. Yeah, sure. Be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, let's move on with a website update. Subi. And just a starting warning, no, we are not talking about eliminating the inventory committee or changing who's chair of the inventory committee. That was sort of a
Understand. I understood. I just brought it up for you.
yeah, but that is not among. There are only 4 recommendations that are on the agenda for this evening.
So,
all right, go ahead, Subi.
So before I start, I just have some administrative clarification. Has everybody had a chance to read my report?
I have, I guess. Yeah, it was out there.
Oh, okay.
It was in the Dropbox, and then it came tonight too.
Okay, great. So I don't need to go through the report. All I would say is that the center part of the report, there are some suggestions for improvement. There are 5 suggestions, out of which 1 we already made a motion last time and it was approved. It was to pull out the history conference as its own page, and we approved that last month. So that's been done. So the 4 remaining suggestions, I need some guidance from you, Cheryl, on whether to put them out as individual motions or bundle them as one motion with parts.
Let's do them one by one. We can do them fairly quickly, though, hopefully.
All right. So the first suggestion was to consolidate the home page and the About Us page. The home page wasn't very clear about, it had miscellaneous things on it. And when I looked at, as my benchmarks, I looked at the Architectural Review Board webpage and the Planning Commission webpage, and neither of them had both of them. So in order to streamline and make it more coherent, I guess, the suggestion is to consolidate them without losing any information. So the motion is consolidate the home page and the About Us page in the spirit of streamlining and making things more clear.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Barbara and Barbara both seconded.
Right.
Okay.
Barbara
Any,
squared.
any discussion? Tammy, go
I
ahead.
had a comment. I looked at the website today, and it seemed to me with what's currently on there, that would make for a really long, initial page that you came to. And so I had concerns, that it would be a lot for just because that also has all of our contact information on it. So, who is with what district. So that was my concern, is that would be a very long page. So I don't know if there's a way to arrange that or maybe trim down what's on there. But anyway, that was my comment there.
Okay. I've never thought of web pages being too long because all you're doing is scrolling down.
But you might not see, like, so for instance, if the listing of our contact information is below the sight line when you first are looking at the page, they may not even realize that there's more there.
Right. So one way of dealing with that's a good point, Tammy. One way of dealing with that would be to, on the left hand, where all the headings are given, when it says the home page or the about us page, then we can have subheadings, right?
Right.
So contacts, mission statement, things like that, so that people would know what the home page is all about.
Right. Yeah, that would be good, because then they would know that they're not seeing everything.
That's a good point. Yes. Okay, we can do that.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay.
Sharon?
Any further discussion? All right. Any other, just double checking. Okay, hearing and seeing none. We'll call the vote on that question. All those in favor of combining the home page with the About Us page with, we'll treat Tammy's comment as a friendly amendment. Is that okay with you, CB?
Yes.
Yes.
With appropriate links to be sure that all of the content is readily visible. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any oppositions or abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes. I know this is a little bit tedious to do it one by one, but I just didn't want the discussions to get too confused. And so your next item?
Yeah, so the next item is, the motion is to move the Fairfax County 275th anniversary page to the events page. So right now it's just hanging out as an orphan, and it's kind of something of the past. So again, in the spirit of streamlining, to move it under the events page.
I second that, Mary.
It fits under there.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion, questions, comments, amendments?
That just makes sense to do that. Thank you.
This is Esther. I didn't quite understand. It says history conference in the document, but you mentioned something else.
They're different.
So the history conference used to be in the events page, but now it lives on its own page. And the 275th also lives on its own page. And we're talking about, Subi is suggesting that the 275th be folded into the events page because it is no longer a current focus of attention.
Yeah, so Esther, we have jumped from 1 to 3 because number 2 was taken care of last month.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call a vote. All those in favor of moving Fairfax County 275th anniversary page to events, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion
Harry,
it's
Harry.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. So we have one abstention there, Elliot, but the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is to add the bylaws to the About Us page. And as we had mentioned, I think a couple of months ago, the bylaws are posted in both the ARB and the Planning Commission websites.
And actually, I'll have a quick question. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Elise
I was
is
going to say
second.
Mary seconds the motion.
Go ahead, Elise.
The message in what's typed on the page has a lot more words. So we're just stopping with add the bylaws to the About Us page, period.
Yes, so we'll probably have a little some language to introduce it and then put the link to the bylaws.
Okay. I think I know where you're going with the rest of the sentence, and I think it's still unresolved, but we can talk about it.
Okay.
I will look at how the ARB and Planning Commission are presenting their bylaws and probably follow that.
No, it's about missions and purposes.
Oh, okay. We haven't come to that yet. Okay.
I thought we weren't going to do it now.
I think I might have lost a break in the in formatting the document.
You said there were only 4.
Yes, I thought there were, but I think I lost a break. So
I think you're missing some words too.
Possibly. All right, so this is about adding the bylaws to the page, and so we would not actually add the entire, to address Tammy's concern about length. We wouldn't actually necessarily have the text on the page itself, but link to a PDF document. Is that what you were thinking, Subi?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. And we had someone was seconding the motion.
Mary
Mary, thank you. Okay. Any further discussion?
You covered my point of discussion, was length. I didn't realize that the ARB and Planning Commission had the bylaws on there. I don't think of that as being a normal thing that we put on web pages, but I think it's good to follow what they've done.
Yeah, they both do, but in one of them, I don't remember which one, had it kind of buried, and under something else. But they do, they're both up for public.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Subi.
So I think we need to vote.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Let's all those in favor of adding the bylaws to the About Us page, a link to a PDF document of the bylaws to the About Us page, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes. All right. And sorry, Subi, I had this all as one thing, and I think it is actually a separate and would have been numbered 5.
Right.
My error. I apologize to everyone.
No problem. So we have one final one, and this last motion comes from the fact that what we call purpose under bylaws is what we are calling mission in the website. The language is exactly the same. And Elise, I know you have some comments on that. Go ahead.
My point is that the language on the website is not the same as the language of the purpose. And I think that it should be made consistent, not only use the same word to refer to it, but use the same words. Somebody edited the end of it. The history in Northern Virginia part is not in the bylaws or the purpose. Somebody was trying to make it more friendly. I do not know who it was. I have a couple theories, but I don't know when it happened. I noticed it many years ago and decided I didn't really care because it seemed to the point. So that's my only observation.
Okay. All right. So that's a good one. So that means in this in the final motion, we should say something like inconsistent with the bylaws.
Well,
So-
I think
Yeah,
is the idea to use the
Same
wording of the purpose as stated in the bylaws, also in our statement, in the text of our About Us page, where we describe what our purpose is, and we just drop the word mission altogether.
Exactly. So delete the word mission and replace it with the language and wording of the purpose from the bylaws.
Okay. So
That's right.
that
Elise?
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's the motion.
Any seconds?
I'll second it.
Okay, at least seconds. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Just a matter of clarification. I couldn't unmute myself fast enough. Could we say to be consistent instead of saying inconsistent? Because it's not very clear to say inconsistent.
Yes.
That's a good point.
Okay.
So to be consistent with the bylaws, we will use the word purpose and not mission, and we will use the wording of the purpose on the website.
Right.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Subi. That was a lot of work.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you, Subi.
Thank you. You're welcome.
A long process too. Sorry about that. All right, so we are moving along to new business, which is just one item, which is, do you all want to schedule and meet earlier for December to have our unrecorded offline Christmas gathering, but virtually? If we want to set aside an earlier time for that, and whether or not we want to do that virtually.
Are you thinking 30 minutes or 60 minutes?
And what did we do last year?
I feel like it was just a half hour. Does anybody remember?
Sounds right. Sounds right.
And we all talked about how this year we would be in person.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have the same conversation this year.
I think so too.
No, this year we can discuss why we're not in person.
Same discussion.
And so I would urge holiday attire for the half hour that's not recorded. And what else should we do? And if the conversation lags, I've promised to prepare a trivia, a Christmas or a holiday trivia game, which we will not need because we never lag.
And we should make a Fairfax County history trivia.
I think
Yes. Yo.
Doing that on Saturday.
How about a Fairfax County History Commission trivia?
Oh, Lord.
Well, there are only a couple of people that could answer all those questions.
Yep.
Who is Love Field named after in Texas? Who is Love Field named after in Texas?
Mr. Love.
Moss Love, who's buried in Fairfax City Cemetery.
Yeah.
Moss Love.
Well, Hanukkah starts on Sunday before our gathering. So, right, Jordan? Yes.
Right, yeah, yes.
I think Ann was going to do the town of Vienna trivia.
Oh gosh, that'll be gripping for all of us.
I go back to the commission. We need to do trivia for the commission.
This will be the hot item of debate for tonight.
I think we should spend a half hour on it.
I think we should move forward. It's 10 of 10.
I think I want to go to bed.
Barbara, I want you to use that sentence over and over and over again tonight.
So is there a motion?
I don't think we actually need a motion.
There's
'cause
no
this is not
motion, but there's a
commission.
hell of a lot of emotion.
I would like to volunteer to work with Lynn on something that we might enjoy for that half hour.
Deal.
Okay.
Let Lynn get through Saturday first. Let Lynn get through Saturday.
Yeah, please, dear God.
Actually,
Hey,
Barbara,
Cheryl,
the
yeah,
first
what?
day of Hanukkah is the 28th of November.
Right, that's what oh, well, yes, that's what I said, just before our meeting on December 1st.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. So, no, I just looked at my calendar.
Yeah.
It's on Sunday and then we're having our party on Wednesday, so it'll still be Hanukkah.
Oh, good.
That's what I was trying to get at.
So we can play
Right.
dreidel and you know, and
Yeah,
spin for
I'll
gelt.
send out dreidels.
That
to
was my
everybody.
thinking,
Lots of
Cheryl. But turn it and then have little questions for each little.
Yeah, no, what are we going to ante up? Come on. Let's get down to real tags here.
Hi,
The
this
basics.
is Denise. Just for clarification, I understand that we're starting the meeting at 7 o'clock on December 1st. Is that
That is
correct?
what we were asking for your kind permission to do that.
No, not my permission. I just want to make sure that it was a half hour early and that I
Yes.
heard that correctly. All right, thank you so much.
And Denise, you need to also hear correctly that half hour will not be recorded.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is not formal commission business, which is, I think, why we don't really need a motion for it.
Okay, thank you.
We just need to agree, and we just need Denise's cooperation.
Okay, Barbara's hand is up.
Okay, this is making me think of something that's a serious thing, and I don't know, it's not on our agenda, but I'm looking at what we're having fun, and it's almost 10, and we have Liz, we have
We have
Denise,
a lot more to do.
we
Yes,
have
we do.
me, we have Chris, we have the
We have a
staff
meeting.
that are at the bottom of the agenda, and I wish we could think about that for the new year, moving them up, because it's unfair to them. That's my plea. As a former staff person who's been their route, I just want us to think about it. So for next month, as they're present, would you have us discuss it?
Absolutely. I was thinking much the same thing, Barbara. Thank you. And that was going to be one of the things for December.
Do you guys remember we ended up putting new and old business at the front a couple of years ago because we found that we'd all run out of steam to discuss important stuff.
So put that on the agenda for next month, okay?
Okay.
December 1st. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Does it need to be on the agenda?
Yes, because
the president can decide it.
We need to talk. We can't talk about it tonight. We're moving forward. We're moving
so-
into Liz's report.
Yes, Liz, make a let's go on to Liz's report. Thank you. What do you have to share with us that's new and exciting?
In the, just to speed this along, we're continuing with archaeological field projects at Riverbend Park and certain things in support of resident curator program. We're continuing to do archaeological lab work on a series of projects and continuing to work with upgrading the archaeological collections. I want to give a shout out to Amy Wells, who has done a workmanlike job stepping in and taking over the responsibilities for development plan review and some of the other reviews that John Rutherford had done previously, and also to Elisa Pettit, who has picked up a lot of the slack on the GIS work. So I do appreciate their efforts. Other things, staff has been working with VCRIS, Virginia Cultural Resource Information System, training this in the past couple of weeks. We've been doing that. Staff attended both the Archaeological Society of Virginia annual meetings and the Council of Virginia Archaeologists annual meeting. And that's probably really all I need to say at this point.
Oh, it sounds interesting. Meetings are always fun. And I have some items for your upgrade your collections that I need to talk to Amy about. All right, any further comments, questions? And I do apologize to staff that we are keeping you up so late. Megan.
Oh, I forgot Megan. Oh.
Yes, I was the ML earlier.
Right.
So
Not Mary Lindsay.
Yeah, no. I'll keep it quick. We've still been having meetings about the collections facility. We had a document update meeting at the beginning of the month, and then we had a subsequent meeting with Space Saver about shelving units later on in the month, and we're continuing to work on that. I gave a presentation at the Mid-Atlantic Association of Museums annual conference earlier this month that was called Collections During Crisis, Installing Innovative Exhibits and Moving Collections During a Pandemic. And then there's just a couple of volunteer HSVC updates. The LTE position has been filled. That has been open for a while. So that position has been filled, so I no longer will have to do administrative duties for the HSVC, which is great. She just started. We had a volunteer cleanup event, the Young Men's Service League Ultimate Gift Project that was held at the Nike site on October 23rd. There was 126 volunteers that day.
Oh.
And the next event is next weekend at Mount Air.
Cool.
That's it from me.
Awesome. You know, would you be interested in sharing your presentation with the commission on collections in the time of crisis?
Yeah, it was actually a panel discussion that I did with
okay.
Kim Robinson, who used to be from Arlington House and is now at a different position over at Harper's Ferry, more administrative exhibit position for the NPS. But the presentation is online on Mid-Atlantic's YouTube page. So.
All right, yeah, so send us the link for that.
Sure.
All right.
Hey, and Megan, who is leading the work at Mount Air?
I believe it is Ed.
Okay, I'm going to call him because we haven't been consulted about that at all.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll mention that at our branch meeting tomorrow.
Good. All right, excellent. Virginia Room.
We have a new admin assistant, Shelly Cox. She started on October 25th. So thrilled to have her, and she came back for another week. So I think she likes working for us. We gave a ton of programs, presentations, town halls. I'm not going to go through them all, but that was a very eventful month. We got some cool new collections, and the new ScanPro 3000 microfilm machines are now fully loaded and fully operational. So come check them out sometime if you're around, and that is about it.
All right. Thank you. Any questions, concerns? All right. Denise.
Okay, just for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to go over anything on my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions now. I just have one new item that was not in the staff report. So I'll pause here for questions. And moving on to the new item, I received a membership renewal from the National Trust. It is $250 and it's due in January. So I'd like to know if you all would like to renew your membership to the National Trust.
Yes.
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 You need a motion? Yes.
I think I do to spend money.
I was just about to say that. I think we need a motion.
All right.
I move.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I move that the History Commission renew its membership for the National Trust for Historic Preservation in the amount of $250.
Second.
Let's have Elliot. That was Elise seconding. That's the voice I heard most clearly. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. So we are renewing our membership in the National Trust.
Denise, you will submit that directly?
Yeah, so I can pay for it by credit card, Barbara,
Okay.
when I'm in, but I can send you everything so you have receipts.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just wanted to comment with regard to Clark's Crossing. that that is proceeding on to the Board of Supervisors November 9th, and Anne is drafting a letter renewing our request to have a professionally prepared nomination for the inventory associated with that proffer. So just point that out.
And
Okay.
I did want to add, just because we were speaking specifically about that case, I'm not able to attend the Board of Supervisors meeting next week. I'm giving a presentation to the New Gum Springs Civic Association on the different types of preservation designations for historic districts. So unfortunately, I'm not able to, but I am coordinating with a staff coordinator and providing her some background information. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you for letting us know, Denise.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. And Denise's very comprehensive reports, as always, are reproduced in the agenda. If anybody has any questions or concerns. So then we are moving on to committee reports. And before we start our regular round of committee reports, I forgot that I had eliminated nominations committee from the regular list. But Carol, do we need to talk about that at all now, or do we just wait until December when the
No, you needed to have talked about it in October, and we should have had the slate now and then vote on it in December. So we're behind the 8 ball here.
Whoops. Okay, so how do we proceed?
Well, I think we need to get a nomination committee at this point to come back with a slate in December to vote on.
The nominating committee is not officially appointed by the chair, so basically you have to solicit for volunteers.
Okay, thank you. So we need a nominating committee in order to be able to hold elections in December to come up with a slate of candidates. Anybody wish to volunteer to be on that committee?
This isn't volunteering, it's a question. How many positions are we filling this time?
I believe one. Barbara Peters, I believe his term is expired. Isn't that true, Barbara Peters?
I mean,
That's
to be technical, if I'm looking at the right bylaws, and you're never sure about that anymore, everybody serves a term of 1 year, but your max is 3. So we think of it as a term of 3 years, but everybody has to get, quote, re-elected.
Yeah.
Right, and the hope is that the other 3 officers will cheerfully serve another year.
We do hope
that is the expectation, absolutely.
How cheerful do we have to be?
That's okay. That's optional, Lynn.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
So
remember they take nominations received during a meeting of the commission. I'd forgotten that part.
Ah, okay.
We could have contested positions.
Okay. So we need a nominating committee, unless we're going to do it completely on the fly in December. Carol, I gather you don't regularly serve as the nominating committee chairperson. That was a volunteer position for that particular year.
I see where you're going, but I do not want to be chair, but I will gladly serve on the committee.
Okay.
That gives you 1.
So the chair shall call for 3 members of the commission to volunteer each year at the October meeting to serve on the nominating committee.
Okay, yeah, so I apologize for missing that in October.
No problem.
So we need 2 more volunteers.
I'll volunteer, but not chair.
Okay.
So we need a chair.
Was
And
Carol?
why don't you be chair? And you be chair.
Was Carol volunteering to be chair? I would be.
No.
I would be.
Carol's a member and I'm a member and we need a chair. So Ann Stunts, why don't you be chair? We'll help.
See, and I broke too many arms last year to be chair.
That's right.
So run when I call. Lots of broken bones.
All right.
Yeah, Ann will do it, won't you, Ann? We'll help you.
Yeah, I can't say no to you guys.
I know you can't. It's short term. It's short term.
You only have to coerce one person into being just treasurer.
And we know from Barbara how easy it is.
Assuming Steve is still willing to serve as secretary.
Yeah, he
yes.
loves it.
There you go.
I
He just said yes.
Good.
So
We're down to one.
all right.
Okay, good.
But let's meet as a committee here. We're not supposed to do this at the meeting.
Right. No. So we have a committee. No, I didn't mean to do that. Yes, but we have Carol, we have Barbara and Ann as chair of the nominating committee, and they will prepare a slate for us to vote on in December. And my apologies for not doing that in October. I actually was told about that October deadline. Now that I hear it, I remember I was supposed to do that. All right. So now we can continue with our regular committee reports. Lynn. Did Lynn disappear?
No, she's here.
You're muted.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, there you are.
Ever muted. Here we go. So last year, I know I reported on the conference as it being one of the most challenging in our history. Well, we usurped that this year. We have had more challenges this month, from dropped presenters to a presenter who's been ill, to a video that couldn't work, to consternation behind the scenes, to just having learned today that our website was never updated to say that we are in fact live streaming. So it's been a challenging conference, guys. However, I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks that really want to make sure to attend. I do need to hear from all of you as to whether or not you have gotten Mike Irwin's email with the updated save the date and the agenda. If anybody has not, please send me a private email and we'll make sure to get it out to you.
Did that come from him?
It came from Mike. Yes, that was his opportunity, was to get it out to everyone. I have been totally slammed trying to.
Yeah, it wouldn't. I don't know that it comes with Mike's name associated with it. It's like a general History Commission email, Gmail account.
That makes a difference. Okay.
Okay, I thought Mike had his name on it. But anyway.
That he sent out. Yeah. Okay. Good.
All right, and he's going to do a reminder. I think tonight. Actually, he's going to do a reminder for us tonight.
I'll keep an eye out, 'cause I don't think I got the first one.
Okay, just shoot me an email and I'll just make sure to respond with a couple of attachments, because I want you all to know what the agenda is going to look like. Let me go backwards on this. 2:30 on Friday. Esther and I have a dress rehearsal with Channel 16. If there's any way we could suggest that Val get a spot bonus for all of her work with us, I would be strongly in favor of that. Channel 16 has bent over backwards in terms of trying to orchestrate and catch up with people and organize and set tech times and broken tech times and rescheduling and showing up for tapings with people not being ready. I mean, Channel 16, I would be surprised if they say no to doing the conference next year. I mean, they have gone above and beyond the call of duty. Esther and I still have our teleprompter speeches to get together. By the way, Esther, I've got part of yours left over from last year, so we can talk about that offline. Wow, it has just been a heck of a year to really try to pull this together. However, in the end, I think we're going to have some dynamite presentations. And I really want to encourage you to let folks know about the first part of the day on Saturday, our early Native American heritage, especially because November is Native American Heritage Month. So this is really pretty important in terms of what all we're doing in the morning. And most importantly, as we kick off a couple of things, we will be acknowledging the 2 awardees. So this is also my awards report. And we discussed that last month. It's Jeff Clark and Maura Keeney for distinguished service. And most importantly, we are dedicating this conference to John Rutherford. And Liz, when you see the graphic that Channel 16 has put together to honor him, I think you will be duly impressed. So lots of good graphics, lots of tedious, focused time in terms of counting down to the nanosecond here. Just a tremendous amount of work has gone into this year's conference with more glitches along the way than I think any of us could have imagined. We'll do some lessons learned, but for right now, the conference committee gets a moratorium for November and December, and we'll kick back in with meetings in January. And I'll be letting you know in December when we will be reconvening in January. Okay, conference committee, anything I left off?
The one thing I wanted to
think-
ask.
Go ahead, Liz. Yes.
Is will the conference be recorded so people can see it?
I believe so. I believe so. I believe so.
It was last year.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You can see it on Channel 16, and on Facebook Live posts tend to hang around for a while too.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed going back to it a few times.
Yay. Thank you, Anne. Thank you. That's a good tribute. Yes, Esther.
I wanted to comment that this is virtual. You will be conveniently located in your own zone, relaxed. So please, all commissioners, please attend.
That's right. We won't know if you've got your jammies on or not.
I did my ironing last year.
I will have to duck out and lead a bunch of Girl Scouts on an animal habitat walk, but other than that, I will be there.
That's important. That's really important. So look for if you email me, look for a response with a new save the date and an agenda for the lineup of the day. Yeah. And I do have to say one thing in terms of Jeff and Maura. I had the pleasant fortune of being the one to call them and tell them that they had received their awards. And I may have mentioned this last month too, but it was just a real joy to hear the elation in their responses. So we've got some good people that help support all the good work that we do. And the committee, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been a time of challenge. I think we've got just an outstanding array of people on the conference committee. So I think that's it, folks, unless I missed anything else.
No, I think that's great.
Okay.
Oh, wait, Elise has her hand up. Go ahead, Elise.
Yes, Elise.
Hi, I don't want to be obstructionist and I don't want to be difficult, but in early September, Denise forwarded an email from the county attorney regarding whether we have legal authority to give monetary awards to the public. I do not wish to talk about it this month, but I do not want to see it slide another month. Thank you.
Sure. Elise, that's a legitimate concern. It is on my to-do list. And, for us as an awards committee, we're going to need to take a look at that. Because there were no monetary amounts involved this year, I've let this slide, but where I have started to do some research is to circle back with the school district.
Lynn, the school district, did you read the letter, the email? It says there's no problem giving awards to the school teachers. It was the general public.
Okay, I just feel like I need to make sure some I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Okay.
And I made a suggestion to the chair that I would really very much like passed on.
Okay.
Because I'm irked about a number of things, but that one's kind of at the top of my list.
It sounds like we've got some things to talk about offline, Elise. Let's try to do that in the next week or two, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I have a question for Lynn. So Lynn,
Yes,
do you
Subi.
do you foresee the flyer being updated again so that it's on my radar to update it on the website as well?
The flyer, what are you talking about?
The save the date flyer. You said that there will be an updated flyer coming up, or did I miss here?
It should have already gone out this week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the one we updated today, right?
Yes.
On the web.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And all of that on the website should have been done back in September because we talked about it during, you know, our committee meeting. So we've been a bit behind the 8 ball on that. But anyway, Elise, why don't you send me an email and let's make sure we address some of your issues. I am concerned. You're a very valued member of the wards committee.
Lynn, I think this is something that needs being done in conjunction with the chair.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk to Cheryl about that.
So I will rewrite the email that I sent to Cheryl earlier last month.
I can forward it if I'm sure I can find it. I didn't.
Just give me until Monday, guys. Okay.
No problem. Let me look at it because there were certain things that were had to do with the time when I wrote it.
Okay.
So I will clean it up and send it on.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I thought I was being responsive to it, Elise, in the sense that I didn't.
You didn't
pursue.
respond to my email, so therefore I had no idea what was going on.
Okay. All right. Let's proceed. Term limits investigation. Jordan, do you want to talk about that? Oh, wait, sorry, I'm skipping. Gretchen, I think has left. She
I
indicated.
think we're on African American. No.
Did I turn my page too soon?
Maybe because Gretchen.
Yes, I did. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So African American History Initiative, Phyllis Walker and Mary Lipsey. Phyllis is not here. Mary, do you want to give the report?
Just 3 big points. First of all, we learned that from the county that whatever the capstone GMU students would produce, the county could not host. So it could not be put on the History Commission website, et cetera. That does not mean that they're out of a job. We're still working to see if, and Denise is helping us get some answer to questions that the work that they produce will be out there available for the public. As soon as we know definitively, we'll let you know. For all the committee members who are working so hard, we put the due date for this Friday to get the templates in. We've given an estimate of about 200 templates that'll be accumulated. And you may have wondered why we asked you to send it to both me and to Phyllis. That's a fail-safe measure. If one of our computers crashes, then hopefully the other one still has it. So that's why we're asking you to send it to both of us. And editing will take place after that and before it goes on to anywhere. Okay, so that's it, unless anybody has questions.
Okay.
Wait, I have one quick question.
Yes.
Mary, you asked everybody to sign their name. Does that mean each page or at the end?
No, you put it on your, what we're calling the table of contents list.
Okay,
so
it's
one page, name and email.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mary. And semi-quincentennial Gretchen, I think, is not here with us anymore. I know she was saying she had to leave early.
Yeah.
So she had no report for the 250 at the state meeting for Friday was postponed, and there was no hasn't had a county meeting since the last history. There hasn't been an intervening county meeting since our last history commission meeting. Jordan, did you want to? Can we postpone that till December? You think?
What's the matter? You don't want to talk about term limits at 10:20 at night?
I think we already did last month. We told you we didn't want them.
He's been looking into. There was a committee formed, and they've been looking into what other districts have been doing.
Oh dear. I know the Board of Supervisors and Jeff McKay does not have this on their agenda right now. I've done research too.
Oh, good. Well,
just
okay,
FYI.
I'm happy. Whatever the chair decides to do. I did contact the National Alliance of preservation commissions. Got lots of information from historical commissions across the country that I'm happy to share at the appropriate time.
Right. I just think,
and I want to thank Subi for joining me on this task force. There were many people who wanted to get on, but we had to limit it. I'm sorry, those of you. There is a waiting list, and we'll pull you as openings occur.
It's a competitive application process.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I will just say one thing. The majority of commissions do have term limits. So there you go.
No nepotism here.
To.
What's that?
I said it doesn't mean we have to.
That's right.
No,
yeah. And no nepotism here.
Okay, so that's I guess I have lots of information. Maybe next time I'll share some of their comments, and then I'm not sure where to take this, quite frankly, after coming up with this information. I don't hear resounding support for the idea, but
nowhere.
Be that as it may, yeah, I thought it was important to raise.
Yes.
Okay.
I was gonna say I'd like to hear just what your findings are. So at a later time, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to preempt the conversation. I just just thought, given so many of the items on our agenda are time sensitive, but this one, we don't need to address right away.
Absolutely.
So. I think that's a fair observation, Cheryl. I do.
Inventory
in terms of the time tonight, yes, right.
Inventory, budget, or annual report, Elise?
No report this month on any of them.
Okay,
and ARB ahead of time. I got my report in promptly. Read it. If you have any questions, ask.
Okay, thank you so much.
I read it.
All right, and we do appreciate the report, Elise. Markers, Mary, do you have anything to report?
Barbara, Nathan and I were at the Frying Pan Park today with meeting with staff or considering markers for the Edward Lee family farm. So we're working with them. And while there, I noticed that the History Commission marker there was put up in 10 years ago, is badly needed in being repainted. So at least if I remember right, there is funding for maintenance, and I will call the CWA Studios and also FMD, because somebody has to take it down and get it to the government center. And if is there anything else I need to do with that, with Elise, just to ask that the funding come out of that maintenance fund?
We have a pot set aside for maintenance.
Right.
And just find out what it'll be, and I imagine we'll vote to do it.
Okay, sounds good. I don't need to make a motion or anything like that.
No, not to pursue it.
Right. Okay.
Also, Mary, I have a question. If we know of a marker that appears to need some repair and maintenance, how would you like us to handle that?
Just email me and I'll go look at it.
Okay, Ivocoda needs some attention.
Okay.
Also, Mary, it's the Lee family site, of which we have to know the site. The Edward Lee house still stands, but it's the site, the Lee family site. And the reason that the Frying Pan staff are working on this is part of One Fairfax, because the Lee family were the first African Americans to come into the Flores area with their land and to purchase land there. So it's a wonderful idea, and we just to clarify a little bit.
Sounds good. Okay. Anything on cemeteries, Mary?
Mute.
You're muted.
Mute.
Okay. I was involved with 3 cemetery cleanups in October. The Summers Cemetery in Lincolnia with a DAR chapter, the Eagle Scout project at Sons and Daughters at Pine Ridge Park, and another DAR chapter with the Pearson Family Cemetery in Burke. And I'm continuing to work with Germantown Cemetery. We have a big cleanup slated for Saturday, November 13th. And that's it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, Esther, ethnic and oral history.
Finally, thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethnic and Oral History Committee has not done very much because I've been busy with the history conference. Not making excuses, but that's the fact of life.
Yep.
So I would like to postpone the meeting that was set for the 16th so that we meet in December instead. I spoke with the Channel 16 representatives and found that we would get interview dates for January instead of December.
Okay.
So we could postpone a month, and I will contact the committee to make sure that December 21st would work for them. And then get back to Denise or Grace.
Esther, how many oral histories have we done, though, in the last few months? Because I think we've done, compared to the past, we've done
5.
quite a few.
5.
See, yeah, I think that's a nice statistic.
So we'll shoot
this time.
for 2 to 3 in January. We have to get on the schedule, Channel 16 schedule. So they don't have those dates out yet. And as soon as I get those dates, I can write letters to folks. So that's the end of my report.
All right. Thank you.
Nicely done, Esther.
Thank
you. Resident Curator Program, Robert.
There you go. Can you hear me and see me?
Can hear you.
Yeah, I don't have anything to report per se. I will tell you this though. The resident curator program has been a little bit because of COVID on the back burner, on hold. But as we move into the new year, there are at least 3 properties that will come online back for reposting, repositioning, re-advertising, and selecting. So the committee's probably going to be very busy as we move into the new year. So picking new curators for a few of the properties that have been a little bit silent. So there's my report. Keep it short.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Anne, anything to report on bylaws? I don't think so, yes?
Ann Barnes, nothing to report on bylaws.
Okay. And stunts advocacy.
We had a great advocacy meeting last week, and you'll see you'll see the minutes next time, I hope. And we've scheduled, am I right? We scheduled a meeting for ourselves for December 9th and in the evening, virtual. So I will get that information to Denise, but and I'll write to each of you guys. Great committee. We couldn't have more fun. If anybody'd like to join us.
I am so sorry I couldn't make it. I felt like crap by the time evening rolled around.
We understand, and this
Thanks.
is not the time to be making you come to a million meetings. But it was
okay.
just really good brainstorming.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Okay. All right. And Elise, as she mentioned, did submit a written report and it describing the activities of the Architectural Review Board and what they've been doing, and that is in your expanded agenda if you want to see that. Does anybody have any questions for Elise about that?
Cheryl,
yeah.
This is Bob. I have just a small thing to say about to add to my report, if I can. The 3 properties I mentioned are the special exception for Elmore Farmhouse. There's an application at Margaret White Gardens, and there's an application at Ash Grove.
Okay,
that'll
great.
be coming online.
Oh,
okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
David, Fairfax City.
The city of Fairfax has a small museum, and it is housed in the very first elementary school, constructed in 1873. It's a 2-story brick building that was restored and opened in 1992 as the City Museum. And so it's been in its current configuration and use for 29 years. It is on the National Register. The building is in very good condition, but success has really cramped the use of the facility. So the City of Fairfax has now funded and has just put out an RFP for a facility, a feasibility study to assess the city museum and to consider alternatives and possibly constructing an addition to this building. If that is done, it will be done with the utmost sensitivity to the historic nature of the current building. Other than that, I don't have anything else to report right now.
Cool.
Okay.
That's exciting.
Good.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Any announcements?
Oh,
Oh, sorry, Lynn, I see. Go ahead, Lynn.
It's just a quickie. I've been docenting at the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial. Did so earlier this week with the Army military wives of the Burke zip code area, and did another one a couple of weeks ago as well. So Mrs. Robert Walker is still out there making a difference.
Cool. Anne?
oh, we might have said this already. I hope everyone knows that our own Barbara Nafe is getting the Mayo Stone's Cultural Heritage Award, it's called, at the Ellie Doyle. And you got it last year, Mary, or the year before? So it's just, it's really cool people who get this award.
Yeah.
And so everybody should be online on November 19th. It's a Friday. There will be no food served. Ellie Doyle is famous for amazing refreshments, but not this year. So, but we're all going to be rooting for you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you. It's quite an honor, and I'm very appreciative. So thank
Yay.
you.
Yes, bravo. Has everybody received any notice for that?
I have not.
I did.
Okay, I'll try.
Yeah, is it black tie, Barbara?
Only for
Barbara.
No, I'm not even sure. I did an interview and I talked 40 minutes, and they're going to show 3. So Lord knows what I'm going to be saying in 3 minutes. And that may be the only time you see me. And so that's what I was wearing on September 15th. So I don't know. So, but we can invite anybody. So we should send the invitation that we got, Cheryl, whoever, so that all the commission can come if they want. I'm one of many. It's just all kinds of people that have worked hard. So
yeah, it's the park volunteer awards night is what it is. So I will send that. I will forward that.
Good. Thank you.
And any other further announcements? Oh, I see there's somebody who's got a hand up.
It's me.
Oh, Tammy, there you go.
I did put my hand up. So we had last month we had a tour of the Springbank property, which had belonged to George Mason's grandson, and later Charles Henry Quander. So it's a great long history of that piece, and it was wonderful. And we're doing it again this month on the 14th. So if anybody wants to put on their hiking boots and come out and walk the Springbank property, it's a really cool opportunity. In addition to that, the Mount Vernon Regional Historical Society also has an indoor event, this is our first indoor event since COVID. We are in the Gum Springs Community Center, and we have Mary Thompson of Mount Vernon, who is going to come talk about her book about George Washington's enslaved people, and, the attitudes of George and Martha Washington in terms of slavery and sort of what has happened to the enslaved people who are free and those who were not freed at the end of George Washington's life. It's really kind of cool that this is happening at the Gum Springs Community Center. I don't know that Mount Vernon has ever had a presenter come to the Gum Springs Community Center. So we might be breaking ground here. I don't know. I'm very excited about it though.
I think it's wonderful.
What
that
day
is
is
on-
that?
That's on November 9th at 7 o'clock in the cafeteria there at the Gum Springs Community Center.
Cool.
So it should be really neat.
Sounds awesome. Yeah, the Springbank talk, somebody came back from that and, some interesting information about Thompson Francis Mason that we hadn't been aware of. Okay, any other announcements?
See you all on Saturday.
Yes, I think at that point we are ready to adjourn. I don't know that we don't do a motion to adjourn, do we?
Just say goodbye.
We just say goodbye.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
long,
good night, everyone. Thank you
farewell.
for your patience.
But I like that we talk
Good
about
night,
that every
Elliot.
month,
Good
whether or
night,
not we have a
Elliot.
motion
Go
to adjourn.
bed.
Sleep tight. Sleep tight.
Good night.
Okay.
All right. Good
Thank
night,
you,
everybody.
Thank you, staff.
Bye.